Hello. Hi, Stan. Hello. How's everyone's day going? Okay, I know. What were the chapters that I'm supposed to read together? What was it? It was 63 to 72. Okay. I might have to save that for tomorrow if I have to read them all together. It'll depend. Yeah, because these are like a bit longer chapters coming up. Alright, I'm good. Okay, we're a little over 50% of the way done. I think it said we were like 54% of the way done. I think we have like a little over 100 chapters left, which isn't too bad. We're gonna see how many we get through tonight. I know Kami said to do 1063 to 1072. I'm not feeling the best today. So this is either gonna be a really long stream or it's gonna be like an hour and I'm gonna do up to chapter 1063. Fully depends, and then I'll do the bigger chunk tomorrow, but we'll see. I'll start off though. Tonight at 10, looking at Miss Messenger, who stayed in place, Klein walked over to the desk and wrote, "I'll be on time." In addition, the situation in Backland has become tense recently, making sure to keep the matter under control. After reminding Sharon, Klein folded the letter, took out a gold coin and a rectangular diamond that kept reflecting light. "This is yesterday, once more charm. It can allow you to temporarily borrow powers from your past self." Klein handed the 3 items to Renette Tinker. One of the blonde red heads in Renette Tinker's hands opened its mouth and bit down on everything. The remaining 3 said, "Why give me?" Counted as part of the remuneration I'll be paying in advance. Klein said with an ordinary smile. A Rhodes reminder made him feel that it was imperative to make money preparations. Renette Tinker didn't ask further. The 4 beautiful heads bobbed up and down before their hair as though they were nodding. She then stepped into the void and vanished from the room. Looking at the light rain and the dark sky outside the window, Klein took off his coat and handed it to Valet Eniu. "I will check." And you wonder why you got censored. You wonder why you get censored, David. At 9:50... At 9:50 on the street near Tussock River in Cherrywood Borough, in the commonly seen autumn-winter rain in Backland, a rental carriage turned in and slowly moved forward. On the carriage, the red-eyed Emlin White, who was holding a top hat in hand, looked at the young man with pale looks and disheveled hair before curling his lips. "Is it here?" The incorporeal figure Merrick nodded and pointed to the neighboring building diagonally across the shops over there and said, "That's right." "That's a bookstore. The owner's name is Charlie Racker. and is pure Loanese. However, he went to the southern continent once when he was young, hoping to be a tycoon. There he became a member of the Rose School of Thought and a believer of the Chained God. He was later sent back to Backland and was made to gather intelligence, as well as provide assistance to other Rose School of Thought members who were executing other missions. We've been watching him for a while. KK. We've been watching him for a while, and wish to find him off and sever the source of intel for the Rose School of Thought so that we can create a better living environment for ourselves. However, we ultimately held back. Emlin smiled and said, "The facts have proven intolerance can indeed be exchanged for better results. To be honest, your performance is quite different from what I imagined for a temperance faction wraith. I thought you'd be very terse." Merrick glanced at the vampire, he called him a vampire, who was already a viscount. Different people have different personalities, and temperance is only meant to control excessive desires. I'm afraid you wouldn't understand, and that it would affect the final result of the mission if I didn't explain this matter too clearly. That way, the desires that need temperance will exceed the limits of what it should be. Although it's very philosophical, there's no need to use me as an example. Emlyn leisurely leaned against the wall and looked at him. Continue with the previous topic. Merrick looked out the window again. In Charlie Racker's house is a female servant from the Paz Valley. She also has a member of the Rose School of Thought. In addition, in the two houses diagonally opposite Racker's house lives a widow and a male alcoholic. They're believers of the Chained God, and they would transmit information to the Rose School of Thought at critical moments. The thing you need to do is secretly monitor these three people while we're dealing with Charlie Racker. Through the information sent, you'll be able to lock onto the person in charge of the Rose School of Thought in Backland. Of course, we'll definitely give Charlie Racker some opportunity to seek help and send out a signal. Emlyn nodded silently and said, "I understand." He then turned his head and looked at the sky, which was dark clouds that blanketed it, blocking out the crimson moon. He turned to the ring with the ghostly blue gem on his right finger. With his oath of rose ring, it allowed Earth Maestral to share his sense of sight, hearing, and smell. This ring went around one big circle and ended up back in Emlyn's hand. Of course, it was only temporary. As such, Earl Mistral had already heard that Merrick had said and shared it with other sanguine participants. Emlyn originally believed that although he was to inherit the mediarity who was in charge of communication and didn't play an important role, even if that were the case, he felt that he was able to showcase some of his spells as a Scarlet Scholar, allowing him to pass the information in a really cool and elevated manner in front of the Wraith Merrick. To his surprise, I can't tell if it was anybody else that was commenting me or complimenting me on my speed of reading, I would believe it, but I truly cannot tell with you. Didn't need to do anything. All he needed was to be seen wearing the ring. This made him very depressed. He felt that he was purely a tool. Without being a demigod, I am qualified to directly participate in many things, much less to save the race. At that moment, Emlyn felt a little impulsive. He felt that the level wasn't worthy of his secret identity, and he was unable to bear the responsibilities he needed to bear. As for the Oath of Rose effect in being able to allow the thoughts of two wearers to appear in the minds of the other parties from time to time, Emlyn wasn't worried. He had asked Miss Justice to hypnotize him so that he wouldn't think of matters that he didn't want the sanguine upper echelons knowing about tonight. Just as he had a thought, he suddenly heard Earl Maestral's voice. Arrogant, childish, naive. This is a particular thought of Earl Maestral that the transmitted by Oath of Rose, and then scoffed inwardly as he began chanting the name. Ernest Boyer, Ernest Boyer. This Viscount had been hypnotized under the protection of Earl Maestral and had been volunteering at the Harvest Church for a long time. At that moment, Merrick glanced at Emlyn's expression and nodded. Your current attitude is reassuring. Very serious, very solemn, and very focused. Emlyn was first taken aback before he curled his lips slightly. Thank you. The second floor of the bookstore where Charlie Racker's house, the businessman, was over 50 years old, and his parents had long passed away. Despite never marrying, rumors had it that he had a few illegitimate children, but none of them lived with him. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm changing the music right now. Changing it right now. I'm going. Do. illegitimate children, but none of them lived with him. After instructing the servants to check if the house windows were locked, he returned to his bedroom, poured himself a cup of red wine. He sat on the sofa and savored it in a relaxed manner. He was very used to drinking some wine before sleeping. When he finished the red wine, Charlie Racker stood up and walked towards the bathroom. When he passed by the full-body mirror in the bedroom, he casually took a glance and his body suddenly froze up. In the mirror, his face was unknowingly turned abnormally pale, his eyes were protruding, and his blood was seeping from the edges. The corners of his lips were slightly red. As a member of the Rose School thought, Charlie wasn't unfamiliar with such situations. He didn't scream or run recklessly like ordinary people. Instead, he raised his right hand and extended it to his chest. Just like he touched the accessory he was wearing, his body felt like it had fallen into an unmeltable, icy abyss. It was cold, and from the inside out. The cold seemed to have a life force of its own and expanded rapidly, covering every corner of Charlie's body. It made him feel as though his joints and muscles no longer belonged to him, and they began to abide by the commands of others. At that moment, it was as if there was another person in the body. It was cold and blurry, but filled with malice. It directly took over everything other than his thoughts. At the same time, Charlie saw new changes in his body in the mirror. Two figures appeared in his eyes. One was a young man in a white shirt and a black vest. With his right hand having made contact with the object at his chest, the bright lights flashed in front of him. The light seemed to come from a miniature sun, casting light and the heat in every direction. Charlie immediately felt warmth and was no longer controlled by the cold in his body. He blurted out a word: cleanse. The miniature sun in front of his chest burned intensely. It was like a warm water that surged into his chest, forming ripples. With that, Charlie regained control of his body and gave up on the door. Instead, he ran towards the window. The curtain wasn't drawn, it was drizzling outside, dimming the street lights outside. When Charlie Racker walked past the carpeted coffee table area, he suddenly stumbled and nearly fell. The carpet seemed to come alive as it wrapped around his ankles. The coffee table flew up, and porcelain teacups and all sorts of documents landed on Charlie's face. It shattered into pieces, turning into strange, dismembered puppets. Suddenly, figures appeared elsewhere as Charlie's figure appeared elsewhere as he continued running, to the sense of fear lingering in his heart. He never hated his bedroom for being this big before. Fountain pens shot randomly and paper swatted around as Charlie finally ran to the window. As a devout believer, he didn't break out of the window immediately. Instead, he held the curtain and pulled it. At the same time, he pressed his other hand onto the gas pipe. The layer of white frost instantly formed on the black metal surface. The windows in front of Charlie shattered as every piece of glass flew out like a bullet and hit the merchant's face, piercing through the perfectly fine skin and causing blood to gush out of his neck. Charlie's eyes darted and fell back weakly. During this process, he screamed and yelled, but his voice couldn't be heard beyond the room. At this moment, in another room, a maid from the southern continent could clearly see the light from the gas wall lamp shaking. She immediately turned her head and looked towards her employer was, only to see the gas pipes there were covered in white frost. In the house opposite Charlie, the brandy-nosed man who rolled up his sleeves, gulping down alcohol, suddenly noticed the curtains were only half closed. For a secret signal that he and Charlie had agreed upon, having the curtains completely drawn meant that there wasn't a problem. Having half the curtains drawn, or only one side, meant that an emergency situation. It required him to inform the higher-ups immediately. He abruptly stood up. The red brandy-nosed man rushed to safety within a few steps, where he then took out a radio transceiver and code book from a secret compartment. He crouched there and transcoded the instant that happened to Charlie. Then he started to send the telegram. Meanwhile, in the house above the Racker bookstore, a brown-skinned man rolled up his sleeves and poured an indigo blue liquor on her arm. Her skin around the spot immediately changed colors, and under the indigo blue colors, there was a wisp of black light extending out like thread worms. These black beams of light suddenly manifested a strange palm-sized face. Its eyes were thin as rice grains, and its mouth was wide as a tea plate. Charlie has had an accent, the maid insinuated each word, and looking at the face of her arm. Every word she said seemed to have its own shape, forming an indigo blue boiled enemy in her mouth and arm. Immediately following that, the words that seemed to be written began intertwining as they enveloped by smoke and the same color. At this moment, the strange face on the maid's arm slowly opened its mouth and tucked in the indigo blue smoke and text. All the abnormalities vanished, other than the patch of skin on the maid's arm remaining in indigo blue color. In the darkness outside the window, a tiny ordinary bat flapped its wings, changing its motionless state and flying off to some unknown location. On the other street, that was less than 500 meters away from the Racker bookstore, in an air above the restaurant that specialized in southern content cuisine, tiny bats flew out from the darkness and gathered together, forming thick smoke. The smoke and bat appeared incorporeal and disappeared in the blink of an eye. All that was left behind was a man wearing a tuxedo without the corresponding hat. This man was thin, tall, and upright. He had light-colored hair and was nearly silver in color. His eyes were bright red, like blood, and as though blood was hidden within. He was none other than Sanguine Earl Maestro. He raised his left hand in the ghostly blue gem ring and touched the slightly exaggerated bow tie. He looked down at the restaurant and had already closed and said, "Both pieces of intel eventually led here." As soon as Maestro finished speaking, a figure appeared in front of him wearing a black regal dress and bonnet. She had a light blonde hair and blue eyes, and her face was pale like a rather intricate doll. The trees on the street below swayed gently as the light from the gas lamps flushed. A puppet. Earl Maestro nodded slightly and acknowledged Sharon's status and level. Sharon ignored him and looked up at the second floor of the restaurant. There were the remains of Mother Tree of Desire worship. There was no problem. Maestro turned around in midair and nodded towards the darkest area. "Lord Nibs, please seal this place." An elder deep sigh sounded before a pair of wings covered in dark-colored skin in countless patterns suddenly extended out of the darkness. It extended out, turning broader and bigger, taking 2 or 3 seconds to envelop the entire area. The restaurant sank into an unnatural state of darkness, as though it had been moved out of the real world. Maestro didn't hesitate, nor did he attack directly. He looked out a bronze box emanated with many ruby gems and took out something from it. It was a transparent glass sphere and resembled an eyeball. Then the sanguine Earl Maestro grimaced, and the glass sphere fell from his fingers and landed downwards. The glass sphere emanated a glint of darkness as it constantly changed directions and moved towards something in the air, as though it had been attracted by something. Finally, it landed in the room on the second floor of the restaurant. A dazzling white light exploded. It was if the sun had risen in the room, illuminating everything. It made all the corruption, decadence, evil underneath, and darkness rapidly melt away. Earl Maestro, who had already closed his eyes, suddenly frowned and let out a puzzled voice. He didn't feel any resistance from the restaurant. Sharon, who looked down from above, leveled her gaze, although there wasn't much of a change in her expression. Her tightly bound blonde hair seemed to shake a little. After the sun rose, it quickly set, and a bright white light shone helplessly and silently in the darkness. As this, an item that was targeted at evil spirits, that building in the restaurant didn't suffer any damages. The sanguine Earl Maestro opened his eyes and looked at it for 2 seconds before reaching up with his right hand and clenching it. The darkness above the restaurant instantly came to life, transforming into illusory chants and bound the entire roof. Amidst the jarring sounds, the roof was forcibly uprooted and suspended in midair. Without this obstacle, being it Maestro or Sharon, they could clearly see the situation in the target's room. On a square table covered in table linen and radio transceiver sat on the transcoded telegram message beside it. In contrast with the ground was indigo blue and charred. On the other side of the room there was an old piano. The piano stood where brown in color and seemed to have been moved moments ago. On the piano there was a cup of red wine. There was a small, sticky, flesh-colored finger soaked inside. As for the decorations and layout, it was any normal residence. The only difference was the herbal powder and essential oil extracts splattered around. This made Sharon, who could directly obtain information from the spirit world, have a thought. This person here had just left. Before she, along with Earl Maestro and Marquise Nibs, could react, the flesh-colored finger soaked in red wine emanated a misty glow. The light instantly begrudged and brightened, forming a gigantic crimson moon in the room. The crimson moon glow dispersed the darkness of the region, making the demigod participate in battle feel as though they were on the ground looking up at the sky. Sharon's blue eyes froze for a moment as she raised her left hand suddenly and flipped it gently, revealing a dark red accessory in her palm. The accessory looked like a full moon, and there was a crimson gem embedded in it. Around it, at the center, there were symbols filled with full moons and mysterious labels. This was the scarlet lunar corona, which Sharon had obtained thanks to Sherlock Moriarty's help. It kept emanating a tranquil halo, imbuing the welder in immunity to the effects of the full moon. However, the crimson moon in the restaurant wasn't something that was simple as a full moon. It was even closer to the blood moon, or even stronger. An indescribable surge of spirituality came into existence, making the area which Nib's gigantic wings had isolated present a strange, deep, silent feeling, even though Sharon wielded a scarlet lunar corona. She sensed that the maleficent thoughts in her begrudge as though an indiscernible change was brewing. She instinctively wanted to turn into an evil spirit and hide in the objects like the trees and gas lamps along the streets. However, her rationality stopped her impulsive reactions because the crimson moon's illumination had no blind spots. At that moment, the sanguine Earl Maestro saw his stomach bulging bit by bit. He felt that his life pulsing in his veins was slowly condensing, as though making an attempt to take form. As a supernatural creature that could use the power of the moon, he hadn't prepared to eliminate the effects of the blood moon. He originally believed that he would be filled with joy in such an environment, allowing him to freely show his powers, but he never expected the abnormal changes to far exceed his expectations. He felt that if he continued, he would give birth to a new life. It was unknown where the terrifying villainess stemmed from. The authority of the moon induced fertility and proliferation. At the same time, from a huge bat wings and isolated the surroundings and created darkness, white fur grew out of an extremely harrowing manner. Nibs grunted softly as cracks appeared in the sealed-off area. A few streets away, aboard Emlin White was rubbing his blue gem-inlaid oath of rose. It was that moment Emlin suddenly obtained the sense of Earl Maestral, seeing and hearing what he could. The feelings and thoughts belonged to Earl Maestral were transmitted into Emlin's mind after a long period of time. He sat up straight in fright, his expression distorted and storm-churned, feeling the urge to vomit. With the help of creeping hunger, Klein's actual body was hidden in the shadows outside the restaurant. But the marionette he controlled, Conus Kilgore, had already hidden in the darkness created by Nibs and used distortion to circumnavigate the isolation, saying with range of his control of the spirit body threads. At that moment, under the illusory crimson moon's illumination, he was surprised to discover that the marionette, which was intrinsically dead, had an inclination towards reproducing, and that new life was definitely the offspring of Mother Tree and Desire. Man, fuck this bitch. Here's the thing. She's too freaked out. Reel it in. This is sanguine ancestor Lilith is mentioned in the legend of the City of Silver, as well as the manifestation of the primordial moon, which Emlin has mentioned before. Indeed, the Mother Tree of Desire has already grasped the portion of the moon's authority and corrupted it into an especially evil state, far more than the original was. Klein just about swapped location with the marionette and entered the region illuminated by the crimson moon and teleport away with Miss Sharon when he felt an indescribable sense of joy within him. It was the joy of seeing a flower in his garden slowly bloom after a long night amidst the morning fog. It was the joy from leaving the city and heading to the suburbs, taking a fresh air in the forest after the rain, watching mushrooms grow. It was the joy of seeing everything grow, healthy and new life descending upon the world. The white fur and the huge bat wings fell off completely as Earl Maestral's protruding belly sank back. The look on Sharon's eyes, who struggled to hold the scarlet lunar corona, seemed to relax. Right on the heels of that, the crimson moon in the restaurant quickly dimmed, and large amounts of light had been stuck away by someone. Finally, the crimson moon vanished, and everything returned to normal. Did Sanguine Duke Olmir take action? Klein nodded thoughtfully and continued hiding in the shadows. Maestro restrained his anger and looked down at the dining room. He said in a low voice, "The target seems to have detected something ahead of time." It wasn't that much earlier, combing the present situation and revelations obtained by the spirit world, Sharon got her answer. Maestro's bright red eyes revealed a strange glint as he observed a few seconds before saying, "It was almost at that moment we came over." We came over with the person left. The person who left behind the glass, red wine, and strange puppet. This trap doesn't look like it was prepared. It's closer to last-minute setup. Upon saying that, Maestro looked at Sharon and said, "How did they detect danger in such a timely manner?" Sharon's expression was calm as she replied, "It's not because the Mother Tree of Desire." Oh, okay. I didn't know I was supposed to change the music. I didn't know. I didn't know. This one, I didn't know. I'm changing it. I didn't know. I'm going. Just give me a minute. It's loading. It'd be awesome if this loaded any faster, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. I know. Who would actually want to hear me talk, honestly? Sharon's expression was calm as she replied, "It's not because of the Mother Tree of Desire. The evil god wasn't capable of infusing too much energy into reality, making it difficult for her to send the preemptive warnings." The sanguine Earl Maestral frowned slightly, although he was unwilling to admit it. He said rather honestly, "I don't think there will be any leaks prior to this, because if that's the case, the Rose School of Thought's demigods would have plenty of time to use the response from Mother Tree Desire, Abomination Sua, lying in more dangerous and terrifying traps. It would be something an angel could easily resolve." I just realized I didn't change the... spelled this wrong. Because if that was the case, the Rose School God's demigod would have had plenty of time to use the response from Mother Tree's desire and Abomination Sue, allowing a more dangerous and terrifying trap. It would be something an angel could easily resolve. This was the reason why Maestro had said the trap appeared to be last-minute setup and looked rather hastily. This proved that there was no mole. After all, the ones who knew about the operation before tonight were the ones involved. If they wanted to leak information, they could have done it earlier. Shut up. This is unless someone changed their minds or wanted to use the urgency of time to obtain more benefits. And all of these would only leave clear traces. The black-bonneted Sharon continued looking at the restaurant and had lost its roof. That had lost its roof. After a moment of silence, she said perhaps it's a way of detecting danger via other means. For this operation, the Sanguine had used the sealed artifact that could disrupt the Devil's Danger premonition, make things less like a spiritual intuition. Possibly, Maestro couldn't think of a better explanation. At that moment, in a room on the second floor of the restaurant, other than the red wine and strange figure evaporating, everything else remained untouched, as if nothing had happened. Originally, Sharon and Maestro couldn't attempt to use divination to find answers to their question and resort what had happened before the attack, but now they couldn't do so because the surrounding area had been illuminated by the crimson moon. It was equivalent to receiving the corresponding cleansing from the Mother Tree of Desire. This meant that the divination easily led to the evil goddess, and the results would be unimaginable. Without saying that Sharon to speak, Maestro took a silent deep breath and said, there are instances and even matters that are no such thing as 100% success rate. Let's leave it here today. If we stay here any longer, the officials might discover something amiss. As soon as he said that, the black chains hanging from the roof instantly turned dim and illusory. The roof descended once again, covering the second floor of the restaurant and looking no different from what it was like before. Of course, when the storm rained, there would definitely be water leaks. If there was a storm, the entire roof would be thrown up again. The gigantic bat wings and blanketed the area shrank back into the darkness, and drizzle once again took center stage. Hidden in the shadows, Klein watched Miss Sharon's figure rapidly turn transparent and vanish. She saw an illusory cloud in the smoke puffing up the countless tiny bats flying in every direction. He couldn't help but frown and silently mutter to himself, what exactly happened? It wasn't worrisome in an accident. It was worrisome was not even knowing that the accident was. Regardless of what one's level was, the unknown was always frightening. At that moment, he suddenly heard what exactly happened here? When Klein turned his head, he realized that Miss Messenger had walked out of the spirit world at some point in time, standing alongside him. The four blonde, red-eyed heads in her hands were all trained in the restaurant. Can you see what happened here earlier? Klein asked hesitantly. After the mutant pathway reached a wraith stage, the Beyonder was free to enter and exit the spirit world, allowing them to receive revelations from there directly, be it the spiritual intuition or divination. They was rather formidable at that. A corresponding sequence to Angel was definitely powerful in such aspects, therefore Klein posed the question. The four heads held by Renette Tinker shook as they said in unison, no. Klein nodded thoughtfully without further questions. He controlled his marionettes to leave the area. Emlin White, who had reached for a while, rubbed the ring that was embedded in the ghostly blue gem. He muttered to himself in surprise. It ended just like that. Through the oath of Rose, he could sense Earl Maestro's frustration, anger, and reluctance to vent his anger at a lady or others. His initial judgment was that the operation had failed because of an accident. It's over. Upon hearing his words, Merrick was equally stunned. He had actually wanted to ask Emlin White the reason for his sudden nausea and grimace, but he had perfectly tempered his curiosity and restrained his urge. They didn't find the target. Emlin tried his best to recall what Earl Maestro had seen and heard, but due to the seal by Marquise Neebs, he was only able to see the situation via Oath of Rose after the Crimson Moon rose, and these feelings were made ineffective quickly after the anomaly. At the same time, Emlin mumbled inwardly, the demigod from a temperance factory came from possessing a doll. Which masterwork is this? It's simply art. Didn't find the target? How can that be? Merrick's brows furrowed uncontrollably. From his point of view, everything in the operation had been going smoothly up until that point in time. Whether it was him, Sharon, or the Sanguine, none of them had the motives to leak the information the Rose School thought. As for Sherlock Moriarty, he had proven his credibility through numerous collaborations. Suppressing his immense disappointment and puzzlement, Merrick said without much change in his expression, and puzzlement, Merrick said without much change in expression. Then we've left it to the vicinity as quickly as possible. As soon as he said that, a figure began to fade, revealing the qualities of Wraith. Emlin subconsciously waited to ask him if he knew of any doll masters, of course. But after opening his mouth, he found that it was damaging to his image of the sanguine. Therefore, he could only swallow his words back down. Even if I know that master, I don't have the money to buy it. To bear the burden of my mission, I have to sacrifice something. Unfortunately, we didn't capture the demigod of the Rose School of Thought this time, making it impossible to figure out the current situation of the Howard quarters. It'll be difficult to receive that holy artifact in the ancestor. Amidst Emlin's thoughts, his expression slowly turned grave. Backland Bridge area, Iron Gate Street. In one of the billiard rooms of the Braveheart bars, Klein was in the image of Sherlock Moriarty, was sitting opposite Sharon and Merrick. After a brief moment of silence, the black regal-dressed Sharon, who was seated in a high stool, said in the detective, "What are your thoughts on the matter?" Klein thought for a moment before saying, "The influence that the Crimson Moon brought was quickly destroyed." "What you mean to say is that since the Rose School of Thought's demigod had already sensed the immense danger through a certain method or a certain existence, why would you set up the trap that didn't have any effects?" Merrick exchanged looks with Sharon before asking in thought. "Yes," Klein nodded. "He should be able to foresee that under such dangerous circumstances, a trap at this level can be easily resolved. Then why would he waste time setting up and not flee immediately? This was a natural instinct of living creature." Wearing a small bonnet, Sharon moved her head indiscernibly. "On the surface, it's a trap, but it's actually to cover up something," Klein replied, delivering the sentence at a slower pace. "Yes, using such a trap to cleanse the scene and stop any divination to conceal the actual situation back then. Only if there's a secret to hide, without a demigod from the Rose School of Thought, take the risk, and stay unseen for such a long period of time. But it's also possible that they didn't expect us to have an angel from the Sanguine to help deal with the trap," Merrick suggested. Klein smiled and said, "They wouldn't ignore the angel behind you for you to have launched a surgical strike on the concealed Rose School of Thought members in Backland. You must have defectors who know them well." He was referring to the existence of Renette Tinker. What secret would they need to cover up? Sharon seemed to accept Klein's suspicion as she sat upright and asked. Klein shook his head. "There are too many possibilities. Perhaps they discovered the secret of an attack in time. Perhaps they were planning on plotting something in Backland." Having said that, Klein tried to consider the Rose School of Thought was associated with the current tense situation in Backland, but he realized that there was no place for them, be it the orthodox deities or the evil gods. They were unlikely to work with the Mother Tree of Desire. This puzzled Klein even more. He didn't know what kind of unknown ancient accident, such as an unknown factor, would brew. He paused for a moment as he swept his gaze across Sharon and Merrick's face. "In short, we need to be careful and cautious. We need to avoid coming here as well. Yes, under the premise that you can ensure your own safety. Try to monitor other members of the Rose School of Thought again and see if we can figure out the secret they're hiding." "Thank you." Sharon floated up and bowed. Merrick did the same. The scarlet flame soared up as Klein vanished from his spot. According to the agreement, he didn't have the chance to take action. The only room Where was I? I'll have to wish him happy birthday then. He received was one free instance of help from Renette Tinker. After returning to 160 Bogan Street, Klein took off his clothes and went to bed early. Hoping to wake up early, suddenly he heard a series of illusory pleas. It was from a woman. "Miss Justice." With a guess, he nodded and entered the bathroom. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the grey fog. As he had expected, the supplicant was Justice Audrey. This lady gathered £12,000 in cash, hoping that Mr. Fool could transfer it to Mr. World to complete the transaction of Dreamwalker and Hypnotist beyond her characteristic. No, because he truly is. You guys say I'm old. Isn't he like... I don't know how old, but... I heard a rumor that he was like 37. Yes, if the ritual can be replaced by Angel's Embrace, Miss Justice can try to advance the next 2 days. Then, that happens to time. It's time to place the... possibly 53. It's time to place the exploration of Grozel's travel in the schedule. Leonard has already become a spirit warlock for days and has nothing to do. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and replied to Miss Justice, getting her to begin the sacrifice. Bro, I'm not pushing 30. I'm not even close to 30. With the current situation becoming more and more tense, with more and more unknown factors, he wished to strengthen himself as quickly as possible. This included many aspects. First, the increase in number of marionettes and sealed artifacts. Second, the recovery of his helpers. And thirdly, a further grasp of knowledge and secrets that aided him in knowing. What the fuck just happened? And nobody was shit. I said that you're not like a day over 26. A couple other people were like, I'm pretty sure he's like 38, 52. But I was like, I don't think he's that old. You know? Also, happy birthday. Because I heard it was a rumor it was your birthday. I'm also 21. Yep. I actually turned 21 this year. Chapter 1061, Whose Dream? Fried at the dead of night in Audrey's bedroom. After receiving a signal, the golden retriever, Susie opened the door and left by herself, slumping down outside to prevent anyone from disturbing Audrey. Audrey took the Dreamwalker's bionic characteristic, the corresponding supplementary ingredient, and apparatus used for concocting the potion out from a hidden spot. Most of the supplementary ingredients came from the City of Silver, and they were things that she hadn't paid for, since Little Son hadn't thought of something he needed. Bro, Little Son is too kind. He just kind of gives things away. I guess, I don't really think, here's the thing, it's not like he really needs money or anything else that can really help him other than weapons. Maybe like a parent's love or something like that. Pretty sure he hasn't had that in a while. Things that she hadn't paid for since Little Son hadn't anything he needed. She concocted the potion skillfully and looked at the liquid that was dotted with the darkened points of grayish white light. She took a step back, clasped her hands, and placed them in front of her mouth. And I don't know if it was lagging when it was, but happy birthday, Easy. Mouth, as she chanted softly, the fool that doesn't belong to this era. And then she stopped because she couldn't remember the fool's honorific name. A woman of the people, for real. Just as her prayer ended, countless figures in the undescribable form appeared in front of her. They quickly swam and meshed with one another as though they were active in the sea. Above the sea were 7 pure beams of differently colored light that seemed to contain infinite knowledge. Above these 7 lustrous brilliances was the endless grayish-white fog, and above that towering, magnificent palace. At that moment, the door with the place opened. The figure formed the golden lights spread out its 12 pairs of wings, formed a scarlet flame, and flew down, landing in front of Audrey. The 12 pairs of fire wings that layered as they wrapped the blonde, green-eyed girl into an embrace. Such a scene only lasted for a second or two before vanishing. It was as if she was hallucinating, but Audrey had always had the feeling of being immersed with the kind of holy, lofty feeling. She calmed down and secretly thanked Mr. Fool. With Angel's embrace, she could maintain lucidity in her dream and wake up whenever she needed to. She didn't have to worry about being engrossed in her dream or being able to extricate herself. This meant that she had already held the corresponding ritual for Dreamwalker, and the effects of definitely better than what it could have been. After all, not every hypnotist can obtain such Bro, I can't read today. And I'm also not in the mood to not be able to read. Nobody's better at pissing me off than myself. Benediction from the hidden existence and the embrace by a special angel such as this. Audrey, all the best. Audrey mumbled inwardly before she stopped, hesitating, and picked up the glass bottle. No, I know I can't read. I can't read every day. That's the thing. I can't read any of the days that I read. I especially can't do it today. And I'm like, I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the mood to not be able to read right now. Also, hi. Audrey mumbled inwardly before she stopped hesitating and picked up the glass bottle, drinking down the potion inside. This potion wasn't bad as she imagined. Nothing? Okay, I have a question. Because I'm not down for it if it is. Does anything, if I read up to chapter, what is it, 1072 or whatever I have to read to, does anything sad happen? Because I'm not kidding. If anything happens that might make the average person cry, I'm not gonna be okay. I'm not even kidding. Nobody better die. Nobody better fucking die in this next 10 chapters. Don't do that. I know. Okay, so here's the thing. Thank you. Okay, from the horse's mouth. Easy literally just said, he also cried. Why do I always get flack for crying? No, I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm not having it today. If anything happens, I'm already getting pissed off because I can't read. I can't read any day. And I'm like this close to cracking. I'm just warning you now. I might break down if something happens. It was as if Audrey had become the ruler of this world. Her conscience floated up as she looked down upon the various scenes. Her father and mother held hands as they strolled down the garden trail, taking the fragrance as they bathed in the morning light. Having worked through their differences, her 2 brothers, Hibbert and Alfred, rode on horses and brought servants along with them. Laughter accompanied by them entered the woods, competing against each other for more successful hunt. The ambassadors or special representatives of the various countries like Fasak, Intis, and Fainterpotter signed an agreement with the Sodella Place, announcing to the world that the war wouldn't happen, thus dispersing all dark clouds in the sky. The smog situation in Backlund improved. Every company's factory had paused a double review and akin to the industry inspector and national atmospheric pollution council, and they had promoted such standards in other countries. Maximum working hours and the basic labor environments for workers were guaranteed, and the development of every industry was getting better. The number of tramps had dropped to an unimaginable level, and all kinds of protective measures, spearheaded by the kingdom, covered everyone. There was more and more workers who could afford bicycles on the streets. The bicycles clustered together like a huge army, driving in different directions amidst rigid sounds. Children don't need to work in factories at young ages. They could giggle and fool around, running into classrooms with tables and chairs. Oh, that's really sweet. Inside, they flipped open their textbook and began listening attentively. If they didn't wish to study, it was solely of their own choice, not because they lacked the conditions. Women were no longer discriminated against due to their gender. Even the laundry maids could rely on studying to obtain knowledge and find better jobs. These were reports teachers, policewomen, soldiers, miners, and civil servants seen in every walk of life. All kinds of mechanical items appeared on the streets and alleys, bringing the people convenience and joy. In the square in front of Evernight Cathedral, pigeons flew up and landed. People were either sitting or playing in according, fully enjoying their lives. This was Audrey's dream for the future. Unaffiliated Beyonders didn't have to worry anymore as long as they received a checkup of their physical, mental condition. They could walk openly, use their Beyonder powers to earn money in legal ways. This was really wonderful. Bro, Audrey for president. Put her in, coach. I want to see her do it up. If it weren't for me being clear-headed, I would have lost myself to this. I would have descended from my commanding position in my consciousness, taking a stroll with my parents, hunting with my brothers, and occasionally going to school to teach children. I would often work hard for the extension of world peace. Audrey stared at the dream, feeling about a poignancy. She then felt her astral projection rise once again, breaking out of the confines of the hazy world. She saw the dream was like a huge bubble and grew out from the island. Consciousness were silently enveloping it. The air bubble was surrounded by a grey fog from afar. She could vaguely see other air bubbles, and below them were corresponding islands of consciousness. Deep within the grey fog was silent, undulating, simmering, waving, illusory sea. It seemed bottomless. The sea of collective subconscious. This was a scene of a mind world for dream walkers. Only from the manipulator onwards, it was one really able to infer the sea of collective subconscious. Audrey nodded, enlightened, and tracked her gaze without saying any longer. She forcibly escaped her dream. Her vision returned to normal immediately as she remained pitch black outside. Only the street lamps around the garden were emanating light. She then cast her gaze on the full-body mirror in her bedroom. She felt that she didn't seem too much different from before. Only when she observed carefully did she realize that the pair of green eyes were becoming more limpid and deeper, as though she could reflect the souls of each other. Closing her eyes and taking in the knowledge brought by the potion, Audrey quickly grasped the core power of Dreamwalker. By guiding and controlling a dream, she could obtain information and affect the enemy. There was two aspects. First was guidance. I'm reading. Which was similar to Nightmare in the Evernight pathway by using different changes in the dream to guide a target into revealing one's deepest secret. The difference was that Nightmare could forcibly pull a person into a dream, however, Dreamwalkers weren't capable of doing so unless they were combined with hypnosis. The second was alliteration. By modifying a target's dream... Yeah, it was alliteration. Okay. One could influence the target over a long period of time, changing them and making them do things that wouldn't usually do without them realizing it. The principle of being such an alliteration: use a dream in the incentive points of the astral projection as to point of the leverage, showing containment and target soul body before affecting the body's heart and mind, planting it deep in the subconscious compared to directly using hypnosis. A control that stemmed from dreams was more mild and furtive, making it difficult to be noticed and suitable for targeting targets at a higher level. From the looks of it, most matters that involve love at first sight might have had a few hidden cases where the result of dream alliteration. Yes, amongst many popular best-selling novels, the female lead often dreams of a figure and spends a beautiful romantic time with him. Therefore, when they encounter a male lead who, similarly to the figure of their dreams, they will quickly succumb to them and have a strong penchant for love. Audrey recalled the novel she read in the past and suddenly found it amusing. To her, to be it guidance or alliteration, there wasn't an essential enhancement over hypnosis. Instead, there was another beyond her power that she liked even more. It was dream traversal. This made her body turn incorporeal, as if she was an elf in the dream or a dream walker. Not only could she directly hide in someone else's dream, but she could also jump from dream to dream, completing in a blink of an eye physical sense. The restriction of such travelers was the distance between two dreams could exceed 500 meters, and they had to belong to intelligent creatures. In special environments, this can effectively hide myself. Why did Heaven Rambus directly affect me through dream alliteration? Because this place is protected by the church. This evernight pathway is also skilled in the domain of dreams. Audrey thought as she began converging her spirituality. In the ancient palace above the fog, along the long bronze table, Klein sat a few seats diagonally across from Leonard. Why are you suddenly looking for me? Leonard leaned back in his chair and asked lazily. Regardless, he still remembered that this place belonged to Mr. Fool, so he didn't dare appeal too casual. Klein glanced at him and said, I need your help with something. You need my help. Leonard pointed to himself and asked in surprise, Are you referring to Pallas? He didn't think he could help a demigod like Klein. You have a very clear understanding of yourself, Klein hissed. However, I'm really looking for you this time. It mainly involves a few dreams. Leonard came to the realization, as he said with a hint of puzzlement and laughter. Klein, you seem to have changed a little. I mean, you've become more like the past, no longer wearing that gloomy expression. Without waiting for a reply, he straightened his disheveled hair and smiled. That's a good thing. Well, I'm still quite good at dreams. Who do the dreams belong to? Without batting an eyelash, Klein replied, a lone soldier from more than 100 years ago, the Fourth Epoch aristocrat, an ascetic from the Third Epoch, and an elf. Don't you dare! Don't you fucking dare! From the Second Epoch. No. What? Leonard asked with his green eyes wearing a blank look, wondering if he had heard wrongly. Ignoring the elves and giants from the Second Epoch, even the nobles from the Fourth Epoch. I know they have the info we needed, but I actually don't want to do this today. Had to be form particular beyond our pathways and have become saints before they could survive to this day. It can't be that they're all angels aside from the lone soldier, right? Entering a dream of angels. I think it's better to find old man. Leonard's thoughts turned instantly as he thought he was in a dream. I really don't want to do this. No, because am I gonna cry?
When you imagine your dream business,
I'm gonna fucking lose my mind because I have an ad blocker and it did not work. No, but like actually though, am I gonna cry? I just need to know. I truly just need to know if I'm gonna cry. Oh my god. I'm not totally sure what happened there. Okay. Klein glanced at Leonard and smiled. The targets aren't demigods, they've only lived to this day due to some sort of influence. This is also a secret I wish to discover through dreams. He deliberately emphasized the word lived. Without waiting for Leonard to respond, Klein continued. The aristocrat from the fourth epoch is a member of the Zorast family. You might be able to use his dreams to learn more about Pallas Zorast. Old man's descent. Leonard's heart stirred as he looked for the ward to proposal that Klein raised. Although he had gotten along rather well with Pallas Zorast and gradually built some trust in the angel, he still held the most basic level of vigilance against him. After all, he was an outsider who lived in his body. At that moment, Klein added, "For now, don't mention this matter to Pallas Zorast." "Do you think I'm such an unreliable person?" Leather grumbled inwardly as he replied. "There's no need to remind me." Seeing that Leonard had agreed, Klein smiled and said, "Get me a few drops of your blood when you return. This is necessary to explore the dreams." He didn't specifically mention how to give the blood to him. After all, Leonard knew at least two methods. Firstly, he could sacrifice it to Mr. World and request that he bestow it to the world. The other one was to summon the messenger of mysterious origins and place the blood inside the bottle, sending it over with a letter. Blood. Leonard subconsciously repeated the word. In mysticism, one's blood was an important item. It was best not to give one's blood to others, otherwise they might die without knowing the reason. Sometimes death wasn't the most terrifying outcome that could happen. After a brief moment of hesitation, Leonard nodded. "When will the exploration begin?" So he's not even going to tell him? He's not even going to tell them where they're going? Klein was prepared for this question as he replied, "Late Sunday night, close to midnight." He wanted to give Miss Justice time to converge her spirituality and familiarize herself with the abilities. All right, Leonard didn't say anything else. Following that, Klein explained skills in sophistry. Stupid fucking word. So that the dear poet knew how to pacify his grandpa after returning. After returning to the real world, Leonard was deliberating over his words when he realized Pallas Zoras's slightly aged voice. "Why did your former colleague look at you? Is there anything that cannot be explained in a letter?" Leonard adjusted his sitting posture and chuckled. He's afraid that the letter will be leaked. After all, it might involve that person. Just as he finished his sentence, Leonard inwardly mumbled, "Of course. The most important thing is to be wary of you. What I see is equivalent to what you see." That person. Pallas Zoras seemed to understand who he was referring to. "Yeah." Leonard picked up the cup on the table and drank a mouthful of malt beer. He found an ascetic from the third epoch. He hopes to learn the history of the epoch through his dreams. What Leonard said was the truth, but it only a portion of the truth. This was the skill that Klein had specially taught him. An Aztec from the third epoch. He's still alive? Pallas Zoras asked in surprise. Of course, he wasn't too surprised. After all, his level, even if he didn't grasp 100 methods and allowed people to live from the third epoch, he knew at least 5 or 6 methods. The easiest way was to steal the time or life of others to imbue it onto a target. He's likely still alive, but has a very special condition. Leonard explained on what he knew. Pallas Zoras felt silent for 2 seconds before saying with a chuckle, "Is that so? Then I can only wish you the best in not seeing scenes you shouldn't see in the dream. Of course, your former colleague is protected by an existence of concealment, so he must be prepared." Leonard didn't respond to the topic. He suddenly exclaimed, "Old man, are you actually not the least bit curious? Don't you want to know what the true deities were like in the third epoch, or the cause of the cataclysm?" This was the second technique in sophistry. Then Klein taught him, rather than being asked, it was better to take initiative and ask questions. "I can roughly guess what's going on," Pallas Zoras replied with a sigh. He then scoffed. "You took too much initiative to control the flow of our conversation today. This is very different from your past behavior. This means that you have a secret you're hiding deep down. Not bad, it's much better than the past. At least I'm not something that you can see through all at once." Leonard's expression froze. Pallas immediately chuckled. "See, I just gave it a try and you exposed yourself. You still lack training. The former colleague is really..." Leonard could only respond with a dry chuckle as he put down his cup and leaned forward. He then picked up the silver ritual dagger and cut open a wound, causing a few drops of blood to split out. I don't know if you guys have been caught. I have not been looking at the chat. Just to read. So you just gave it a try and exposed yourself to select training. Your former colleague is Riley. Leonard could only respond with a dry chuckle. He put down his cup and leaned forward. He then picked up the silver ritual dagger and cut open a wound, causing a few drops of blood to drip out. Meanwhile, Earl Hall's resident Audrey was also holding a dagger with gems embedded in it. She was preparing to fulfill the promise of providing help for free. She moved the tip of the dagger towards the back of her hand. This pain is very mild. As she hypnotized herself, she exerted force and tore open a wound. It was currently impossible to tear her skin without using strength, even if she didn't reveal dragon scales. On Saturday night, after attending a ball, Klein turned to 160 Bulklin Street. He made up an excuse that he was feeling tired and needed to sleep early. In the wee hours of the night, he got out of bed, set up a ritual, and summoned himself. After some work he sat at the seat that belonged to the world, Gammon Sparrow. He confirmed that once the summoning ended, he could use the Grey Fog's level of standing to forcefully extricate himself from Grozel's travel. At that moment, in front of him were 3 metal bottles and a silver mask. The former was filled with his, Leonard's, and Audrey's blood, while the latter was sacrificed by Miss Justice ahead of time, as she knew that Mr. Starr would be involved with the exploration of the dream this time. She planned on wearing Lie the entire time to mask her face and avoid her identity from being uncovered. After examining it for a while, Klein made a hard-covered, deep brown Grozel's travels to fly out of the junk pile and land in the long bronze table. At the same time, he placed the unshadowed crucifix in his body. Following that, he pulled Justice Audrey and the star Leonard above the grey fog. The 2 dark red beams shot up at the same time, forming rather blurry figures. Audrey and Leonard cast their gaze at the bottom of the long molten table and sized up the items for Mr. World. Then their attention was drawn to the ancient book. Audrey's eyes darted around and curiously asked, "Our exploration this time is related to this book?" "Yes, our targets are inside the book," Klein replied with a smile. "Inside the book?" Leonard asked in surprise. Even though he was a Red Glove, he also read a large number of spiritual case files. He had never heard of communicating with characters in a book. Envisioned. Audrey acutely grasped a key phrase, linking it to the synonyms she had only just learned a few days ago from Mr. World. The Spectator Pathway Sequence 0 is called Visionary, and she knew very well that the King of the Dragons, the ancient god Ankelwelt, was the Dragon of Imagination. After some deliberation, Klein said, "My description might not be accurate. It might be an envisioned world or a true dream. The only thing I can confirm is that it was created. It was created by an ancient god from the Second Epoch, the Dragon of Imagination Ankelwelt. It obtained Vice Admiral Iceberg. Ancient god relic. It's no wonder that it can make a giant and an elf in the Second Epoch and the Third Epoch Aztec and Fourth Epoch human aristocrat. And the Fifth Epoch Lowenese soldier survived till now." Leonard came to the realization as he couldn't help but size up the world Gammon Sparrow. He couldn't imagine what kind of experience Klein had ever since he left Tingen. At that moment, Klein looked around and pushed the lie mask to Miss Justice as he said, "Let's head on in." "All right." Audrey put on the silver mask. Leonard looked around and nodded. "Okay." Klein immediately picked up the 3 metal bottles and poured out some of the bottle inside, smearing it on the cover of Grozel's Travels. Soon this was what the blood was for. Just as thoughts flashed through Audrey's mind, she saw a white snowy storm. Amid snowflakes in the size of down feathers and the biting cold wind in the city that was more than 15 meters tall stood nearby. A soldier wearing leather armor. I don't want to do this. A soldier wearing leather armor on guard by the gates was huddled in a spot that was immune to the wind and snow. As long as there weren't any merchant convoys, he wouldn't head to the block any ordinary pedestrians. This is a world that was completely a vision. It's like it's real. Leonard looked around as he spread out his palms and caught several snowflakes. He felt the coldness of his touch before they quickly melted into the water. After confirming the environment, Leonard suddenly realized something. Klein was maintaining the image of a cold and refined Gammon Sparrow. Miss Justice wore a silver mask revealing the bottom of her face, green eyes, and blonde hair, making it impossible to imagine her actual appearance. As for himself, he didn't disguise himself at all. That was a habit of official Beyonders who openly carried out missions without any disguises. Mr. Stars really is laid back, and his hair is combed very casually. It's such a pity, otherwise, with his looks, he can be a model on the cover of magazines. As a noble lady who has seen too many handsome men, Audrey politely glanced at him before retracting her gaze without making any observations. Klein chuckled inwardly and pointed to the city in the snowstorms. Our first target, the Aztec Mr. Snowman. From the Third Epoch. This was the person most likely to have a link to Amon and his brother. According to Klein's plans, after Snowman would be the fourth generation aristocrat, Mobit was the second because Giant Grozel and Elf Citus involved matters at such a high level, and there was a high chance of there being an accident. Therefore, it was safer leaving them till the end of the schedule. After the exploration of the four people, subconsciously via their dreams, they would enter the sea of collective subconscious in search for any possible secrets. Okay. Okay. Let me just fix this really quick. My pants were pissing me off. Okay. In a rather remote spot in Pesot City, there was a bubbling made of stone. It looked rough and was a cathedral that needed some construction work. The most eye-catching and intricate part was the altar. Erected over it was a wooden cross and a tall figure carrying the cross. Aztec Snowman was sitting in the first pew facing the divine statue, his head bowed, his eyes closed in focused speculation. He was a middle-aged man who wasn't considered old, but had some wrinkles. He was wearing a simple white robe that had been washed countless times. He had brown short hair on his exposed arms, shoulders, calves, and feet. There were all kinds of old scars and scabs. At that moment, two men and women appeared at the cathedral entrance. The men were dressed like black robes and completely different from the surroundings. One was wearing a vest and a half-top hat with a formal bow tie, and the other casually wore a white shirt. The former had pronounced outlined with cold expression, while the latter had black hair and green eyes. He looked pretty good, exuding the romantic air of a poet. This lady was wearing a long white dress that was tight at the waist, while frilling designs at the sleeves, lacy flowers that sewn in the mesh manner of her trust. She wore an intricate silver mask revealing the part of emerald-like eyes, and her high nose, her lips, glossed lips, and lowered half her face. It prompted anyone who laid their eyes on them imagine how beautiful her actual appearance was. They were extremely attractive. It was the same regardless of the angle one took. However, the passers-by and few members of the congregation and the praying Aztec didn't even give them a look, completely ignoring them. This was a combination of hallucination, psychological invisibility. Audrey was already in open operation mode, no longer showing any curiosity. She wept her gaze and said in a gentle voice, "What's most important now is to get Mr. Snowman to sleep. Otherwise, we'll have to wait until tonight." The night in this world, relaxed, trivial. Leonard looked with a smile. Compared to Miss Justice, who only experienced a few supernatural incidents as a Nighthawk, he was already too used to such things. He was very composed and even wanted to joke with Klein. Of course, he didn't know that Miss Justice had recently hypnotized a demigod. Klein glanced at the former teammate. Then, let's begin. He was carrying a shadow crucifix on him. In less than 3 hours, he would drop back to Sequence 5 and have his Bizarro Sorcerer Beyond a characteristic purge, so he naturally didn't want to waste any time. He's back in the crazy adventurous state again. Leonard didn't beat around the bush. He raised his hand, neaten up his hair as his green eyes suddenly turned deep. Suddenly, the purifying Aztec Snowman had fallen into a deep sleep. This is beyond a power of nightmare. Looking at the scene with sparkling eyes, Audrey thoughtfully muttered to herself. In fact, she was aware of the powers of a nightmare, having seen them in action before Black, when they were dealing with the sanguine Viscount Ernest Boyer. However, she was unable to grasp the full picture of it due to the urgency of the situation. It was only now that she made the complete observation of it. Right on the heels of that, she raised both her hands and grabbed her arms in the world and the star. Using her abilities of Dreamwalker, she led them into the snowman's dreamscape. "I can do it myself," Leonard mumbled in the moment he entered the hazy world. Klein and Audrey ignored him and quickly surveyed the area, taking in the entirety of Snowman's dreamscape. They were inside the cathedral, an unusually majestic cathedral. Ancient stone pillars propped up the towering dome, but they didn't make the hall. Don't piss me off. Don't do it. Appeared too segmented and cramped. It remained extremely spacious. The cathedral door was wide and tall, even for giants, lined on both sides with the candles placed in silver cups that emanated warm glow. The altar right in front of his grand magnificent. Above them were grayish-white crosses and sculptures of gods bearing the cross. The statue's face wasn't very clear, but it felt like it was showing pity towards the beings of the world. Snowman was similarly sitting in the first pew facing the holy altar. His head was bowed and his eyes were closed in a focused speculation. This is similar to Afternoon Town's abandoned cathedral that little son showed to us. Should be a building from the same era. Audrey swept her gaze across the brick arches and whispered. At the same time, she tried to suppress her curiosity and told herself to remain calm. Little son. How is he little? The fellow is clearly taller and larger than me. Afternoon Town's abandoned cathedral. Leonard thought in puzzlement as he lampooned. Bro, the lampooning is spreading. Everybody's lampooning now. When he joined the Tarot Club, the son, Derek, had long returned to the City of Silver. Although he would occasionally mention the exploration of the Giant King's court, he didn't conjure any of the corresponding images. Indeed, Klein checked his gaze and agreed with Miss Justice. Then he said to her, "Try to guide Snowman's dream and get him to reveal the important information of the subconscious. Focus it on the Kings of Angels. This mission could be accompanied by both a nightmare and a dreamwalker." The reason we all had Miss Justice to do it was because she wanted to give a chance to digest the Dreamwalker potion. After all, Leonard had already passed this stage, and no matter what, in matters that involved the subconscious beyond her and spectator pathway were definitely more professional. It was that way they carried it out would be more precise and effective. It was only then that Leonard realized the problem. Miss Justice's abilities involved the of dreams. This meant that she had already advanced to Sequence 5 Dreamwalker. Isn't that too fast? Leonard was secretly surprised and in disbelief. Leonard, see, here's the thing. This is why I'll always love Leonard. This is why I'll always relate to Leonard. Because same, Leonard, is that not too fast? He remembered that Miss Justice had mentioned it during their exchange when he joined the Tarot Club. It hadn't even been a month since she became a hypnotist, and now only 3 months had passed. She had indeed tried to purchase the ingredients needed for her advancement at the tarot gathering, but to completely digest the hypnotist potion in 4 months is shocking enough. Leonard's mind raced as he baffled feelings in the pride of becoming the Red Gloves captain, a quasi-high-ranking member of the church. The Sequence 5 Spirit Warlock was gone. While his thoughts were running wild, Audrey tersely acknowledged the request and took a few steps forward to stand beside Snowman. Illusory ripples suddenly appeared in the jewel-like eyes. Those rippled constantly sank deep into the depths, returning to the darkness and tranquility. Invisible ripples emanated out as the altar in front of the cathedral suddenly turned blurry. These magnificent objects, along with the cross and the divine statue, warped and suddenly unfurled, emanating lights and shadows that weren't considered too intense. The light and shadows intertwined with three-dimensional portraits of towering mountain ranges and main peak reached high into the clouds, but the white cloud didn't dare to conceal the main peak and automatically separate around the peak's 2 sides. On the peak of the mountain stood a huge cross that was even taller than the mountains. In front of it stood a majestic figure that was covered in layers of stacked halos. 2 wings, 4 wings, and 6-winged angels were either holding bugles, playing on the harp, or playing flutes. Dancing around the majestic figure was a sang and extolled. 8 blurry figures with 12 pairs of wings surrounded the majestic deity. Some fell to the ground beside his feet, leaning against him as if completely relying on him. Others floated on the both sides, awaiting his orders. This was a scene that Klein had seen before. He knew that the deity was the ancient sun god. He knew that the figures with 12 pairs of wings on their backs were kings of angels. At that moment, Snowman opened his eyes and looked at Justice Audrey. As if teaching his student, he solemnly said, "Only the Holy Spirit can truly serve the Lord. This is the goal I've been chasing my entire life." I see the Lord standing above the infinite radiance, benevolent, scattering over his kingdom in the land. Around him are 8 kings. The dark angels are the first angels created by the Lord. He is his left hand, his proxy, and the deputy of the heavens. The angel of imagination. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, it's one of the two. It was one of the two. Could have probably guessed it was going to be Adam. Is the Lord's eldest son. The Lord said that in a distant future you will become the savior of all life. The angel of time is the Lord's second son. The Lord said that you are the god of trickery and the god of mischief, the light at the dawn of the apocalypse. Okay, maybe Amon's not a good guy. Maybe he's not. But, you know, the ancient sun god could not be a good guy. And they could just be, you know, screwing over my boy. The white angel, wind angel, and angel of fate are loyal followers to the Lord. To the Lord firm. Brave, honest, having been that way from when they were weak till they became strong. Okay. The wisdom angel was sanctified due to his redemption from being penitent and contrite, completely opposite from ones who fell after eating the fruits of sin. The war angel is the Lord's rage and the Lord's punishment. His appearance over the land means war is at hand. From the looks of it, the ascetic has never been to the ancient sun god's divine kingdom, nor has he ever seen King of Angels. What he's describing is probably from religious canon. In other words, what he said is that the official texts say, from the looks of it, Dark Angel Sastri was really the leader of the King of Angels. He was the most trusted by the ancient sun god and was called the Deputy of Heaven. Yet such an existence was bewitched. I wonder what his outcome was in the end and why there aren't any traces of him to date. Klein seriously listened to Snowman's description as he clear understanding of the King of Angels. He never expected that the ancient sun god would predict that Adam would be the savior. This left him somewhat puzzled. So these are all 8 kings of angels. Leonard listened attentively as well. Then was something that old man Pallas had told him in detail before. It was a real secret from the ancient times, something that happened before the cataclysm. Audrey had seen the mural of the 3 kings of angels eating the city of Silver Crater. Through the corresponding images, she had matched them to the eternal blazing sun, the lord of storms, and the god of knowledge and wisdom. So she wasn't too surprised. She turned her head and looked at the world and the star, calmly interpreting the hidden meaning behind those sentences. According to what Mr. Snowman said, the dark angel was created. The 3 kings of angels, White, Wind, and Fate, had followed the ancient sun god from a weak stage until slowly empowered themselves. The weak stage here probably refers to sequence 4. The wisdom angel should be an outsider who joined later, and he might have been from an opposing faction in the beginning. When he heard Miss Justice's words, Klein suddenly remembered a name. It was the Dragon of Wisdom, as mentioned in the City of Silver's myth, High Herabergen. Get a fucking better name. He then nodded, indicating for Miss Justice to continue. After Snowman recited some related scriptures, he suddenly solemnly said, "Our diocese has cultists who believe in the Evernight within it. These are the orders from the kings." Interesting. Cultists who believe in the Evernight, upon hearing Snowman's words, the 3 present were more or less thrown into an awkward situation. Klein, Audrey, and Leonard all had a certain relationship with the Evernight goddess. One was a standard cultist who believed in the Evernight. The other wasn't only a cultist, but a quasi-high-ranking member of a cult, an elite tea leader. The other was even worse, a blessed of the evil goddess. I mean, you know, are all cults really that bad? From the looks of it, the Church of Evernight appeared earlier than... Piss off. The Church of Evernight appeared earlier than what the historical record stated. They can be traces back to the long time before the cataclysm. Oh! However, it existed in the form of a secret organization. Kind of like the Tarot Club did? No. Klein cleared his throat and did a simple analysis, breaking in sudden silent mood. Audrey pursed her lips and nodded. She continued guiding Snowman's dreams, letting him reveal the information related to the King of Angels and the subconscious. Unfortunately, Snowman was only Sequence 5 Aztec. He would be considered a quasi-high-ranking member of the 5th Epoch and would be able to in contact with several important figures and historical secrets. However, before the Cataclysm, a Sequence 5 didn't enjoy such a status. He wasn't even able to enter the Divine Kingdom. So he naturally knew little about the kings of angels and the ancient sun god. What he knew was limited to what was written in the various religious canons. However, Klein keenly noticed that he had mentioned something. There were traces of remnant giants in Northern Ridge mountain range. This mountain range's present name was Antares. Stupid. And it was located in Faceac. It made it easy for him to associate this information with people of Faceac claiming to be descendants of giants, how the gods combat was the giants, and other information. Seeing that there was no connection to the King of Angels, Audrey switched to guiding Snowman's dreams into present. What was most important and influential to him, the majestic cathedral there was standing and beginning to shake as changes suddenly happened. In just a few seconds, the cathedral scale shrank. Outside was a square that had been renovated. Snowman knelt in front of the cross and divine statue, his body bathed in pure sunlight. The blurry figure with simple priest robes appeared beside him, speaking in a loud, solemn tone. Are you willing to choose the path of an ascetic, to give up love and distance yourself from indulgence? To not wield power, to train your mind, to temper your mind, allowing you to approach your Lord by entering heaven one step at a time. It's giving cult. Snowman devoutly kissed the ground and said, I'm willing to choose the path of an ascetic. I give up love, distance myself from indulgence, not wield power, train my mind, and serve the Lord. It will be so forever and even from this day forth. It will be so forever and even from this day forth. The more Snowman spoke, the more resolute he became. In the end, he solemnly repeated his promise. This is the one thing that left the deepest impression on him, and has resulted in the deepest effects on him. Audrey turned her head and said to the world at the start, thinking back on Snowman's past performance and recalling how he never gave up on his beliefs, nor did the Aztec training, despite being stuck in the book world. Klein nodded gently and sighed. He is a true Aztec. Audrey retracted her gaze and guiding Snowman to the present, something that was more important to him, she returned to the world, and the star said in a gentle voice, there shouldn't be much left. Klein glanced at Snowman and said, let's go to the next spot. I won't be doing none of this. I'm gonna start crying. No. No. No, 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 no. 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 I'm not in the fucking mood. I'm truly not in the mood. Inside a house, and I'm not doing this right now. Bro, I'm like preemptively crying right now. I'm like, a moment with his brownish yellow hair, dark brown eyes, high nose bridge, and thin lips was wearing a slightly furry pajamas. He laid on a bed that was half high and half low as he stared at the ceiling, muttering to himself. Winter year is much colder than usual. It's starting to snow. Although it's almost noon, I don't want to get up at all. Sidus, why does an elf like you insist on sleeping in? I don't want to fucking do this. I fucking hate this book. I literally hate this book. I literally fucking hate it. You even press your hands and feet on me. I really miss being single. I could roll around freely in bed. Every corner will be mine, unlike now. songstressitis, leaned her body sideways while sleeping comfortably. Not only did she occupy nearly half the bed, but she also lived a large... No! Because I'm actually... On her side, as her body clung closer to Mobit, she left one arm and leg on him, squeezing Mobit to a corner of the bed, almost to the point of falling off. After pulling up the blanket that was pinned down, Mobit sighed and closed his eyes, preparing to sleep again. Then he really fell asleep. In his dreams, he sat at the bar counter, alternating between sipping hard liquor and gulping down beers. He didn't return home as he claimed he would wait for Citus to come begging him to return. Was that the aristocrat from the Fourth Epoch? At the entrance of the tavern, Leonard glanced at Klein. No, because I'm already crying. They literally were just lying in bed. And I'm like... crying. I told you I wasn't in the fucking mood today. That's right. Mr. Starr's tone and action suggest that he's more nervous than before. He seems to care a lot about the aristocrats from the Fourth Epoch. According to the information given by Mr. World, a certain person that Mr. Starr knows might have seen the second blasphemy slate, and that's an extremely ancient divine artifact. Although I can eliminate the possibility of seeing it in the Fifth Epoch, powerhouse of the Fourth Epoch are more likely to have a chance of coming into contact with such matters. So the aristocrat from the Fourth Epoch is related to the person Mr. Starr knows. Audrey grasps certain matters through the fine observation and interpretation. With this as a premise, you quickly came to the conclusion. Mr. Starr, would you step forward and suggest that he would guide the dream? As expected, the Fourth Epoch reversed asymmetrical beauty, but such attire really made me uncomfortable. Leonard teased before looking at Miss Justice in the world, Klein Moriarty. Let me do it this time. Alright, Audrey replied with a brisk tone and smiled. This was a development that Klein was happy to see. He naturally wouldn't stop. Next chapter? That means I have 6 fucking pages of this shit? That wouldn't be an issue. Leonard then tugged at his collar and walked to the bar counter in a few steps. He sat behind Mobit and ordered a local Sangan beer. He gulped and suddenly said, "You look like a member of the Zoras family. Everyone here knows that." "No, not just humans." Mobit took a sip of the alcohol and continued looking forward. Leonard smiled and shook his head. "Let me introduce myself. I'm a student of Pala Zoras." He planned to use his identity and pull strings and reduce any sense of reluctancy Mobit would have, making it easier for him to continue guiding him. Indeed, the person Mr. Starr knows is from the Fourth Epoch aristocrat, member of the Zoras family. I wonder if a level at that person is. So, Mr. Starr is secretly a student of a certain important figure. No, he said that without complete confidence. A self-assumed student, Audrey even validated her guesses. Her smile became more obvious. After hearing Leonard's self-introduction, Mobit finally turned his head and sized him up. He scoffed and said, "Student? More like a target of parasitizing, right?" Leonard's expression froze. Target of parasitizing? Although Audrey was mentally prepared, she couldn't help but twitch her eyebrows. As for Klein, he had a hard time holding back his laughter. Of course, he didn't believe that there was anything wrong with Leonard's identity as a student of Palazoras. If it were him, he would have said the same thing. It wasn't right to directly mention that it was that he was a parasite victim, right? And being friends appeared too distant, a disadvantage for any subsequent attempts to learn more. The problem this time was that nobody expected Mobit to guess the truth. Dude, that's so funny. After laughing twice, Mobit looked at Leonard, slightly stiff-faced, and said, "You aren't a member of the Zoras family, so how can you become Old Man's student? You can only be a target of parasitizing." Having said that, he slowed down and said, "Don't worry, Old Man isn't too bad. He wouldn't really take over your body. After the parasitizing is done, he will at most take away a few years of your life." Oh my god. Leonard, no! You're still young anyway, so raising your set sequence would make up for it. Actually, most Beyonders can't live till the end of their natural lifespan. Why must he take a few years of my life? Leonard subconsciously asked. Mobit raised his glass and gulped down a mouthful. He replied in daze, since you've already been parasitized, something must be stolen, right? Leonard snapped out of his daze and asked in surprise. So you also call him Old Man? Of course, we all call him Old Man. Aww, he doesn't seem to object to it. Mobit suddenly sighed. He is my great-grandfather, and I haven't seen him for 1,000 years. No, 2,000 years. So the reason why Old Man tolerates me calling him Old Man is because I can remind him of the beautiful past. I wonder if his direct descendants are still alive. Leonard suddenly felt wistful. No, why am I getting upset over Palazorest? That's like kind of sad. This represents that old man, Mr. Palazorest, was an angel. Indeed, Audrey had expected this. At that moment, Mobit sharply noticed a key word and asked, also, why did you say also? Do you call him Old Man? Leonard nodded seriously. Mobit was intensely puzzled as he sized up Leonard again. Don't tell me you have the bloodline of the Zoras family. I don't know, Leonard answered honestly. Mobit shook his head. No, it doesn't look like that's the case. It might be that Old Man suffers a terrible blow and change to a certain degree. That I know, Leonard pondered and said. He was nearly killed by blasphemer Mon. He hasn't recovered yet. Grozel's travel is currently above the Grey Fog. It didn't matter which deity's true name was mentioned in it, since it would be sense. Therefore, Klein, Leonard, and Audrey were free to talk about Amon and Adam. The powerful and terrifying ancestors of Mon family? Moment's voice unconsciously lowered. Leonard finally gained the initiative and asked, the aristocrats of the Solomon Empire are all very cold and evil. Why isn't the Zoras family like that? Can I choose the music now, please? No, because it's actually really sad why he's allowed to call him Old Man. I'm good. I'm like so good to not do that anymore. Also, you guys are assholes. I was like, hey, am I gonna get upset? And you're like, no, it's fine. Clearly fucking not. Clearly not. Yeah, but when you like sometimes are like, oh, maybe, it usually like doesn't happen. But like you didn't really tell me. Did I spell Cosmos wrong? I don't even care to change it right now. Just added an extra O. Oh my god, I have no idea. Okay. Fuck ass chat, fuck ass book. Mulwig glanced at Leonard and said in puzzlement, they aren't that cold and evil. Cosmos. He raised a glass and took a gulp. Don't you know that the higher the sequence, the greater the inclination is towards being cold and crazy? I fucking knew that. And you guys were like, no. And I was like, no. Because Klein's gonna turn evil. I have a theory. Here's the thing. I actually do have a theory that Klein will turn evil at one point. Yep. What major aristocratic family in Solomon Empire doesn't have an angel? That's why they're definitely different from normal people. As for degree of coldness and evilness, it has to do with the choice of their anchor and the trait of their beyonder pathway. I don't know what my great-grandfather's situation is. I only know that he's very kind and amicable, and the way he speaks and acts is rather casual. In addition, the rules set by His Majesty have a key point: disarm money. If either aristocratic families had the same style, he definitely wouldn't be satisfied. The first reason given was something I expected, but the second reason is a little unexpected, but it's quite funny. Was the Black Emperor of the Solomon Empire trying to get himself diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder? Disharmony is actually a requirement. Without wearing too thick a mask, the corners of Klein's lips curled up slightly. At this moment, Audrey's head turned her head and looked at him and asked the same question that she had as Mr. Starr's anchor. All of them knew that the Aztec's taste for the fourth epoch was disharmony and asymmetry, and had considered it commonly sense, so they didn't think too deeply about it and was such an aesthetic style. To the deities, believers in faith, or the anchor, Klein simply explained, so that's the case. Mr. Fool always said that it was to stabilize one condition. Audrey felt her sights broaden, allowing her to consider the relationship between the deities and believers. At the same time, she thought in puzzlement in the early stage of Mr. Fool's reawakening. He shouldn't have had many believers back then. What was his anchor? Leonard listened attentively, as he couldn't help his exaggeration from turning solemn. It was as though he had suddenly thought of many things. He quickly focused his attention on Mobit. After some deliberation, he said, "What kind of angel is Palazorus? What kind of habits does he have?" Leonard is still very cautious. He still hasn't fully believed that the grandpa in his body is Palazorus. Yes, we can't rule out the possibility that the real Palaz has fallen, and that the one still alive is an impostor to the angel of marauder pathway. Such an action is rather normal, and the secret existence replacing the particular identity is equivalent to possessing the identity, so he wouldn't deliberately expose the truth. One more important matters is the interesting in those that involve his safety. Leonard is more reliable than I expected. If not for that, I wouldn't have realized that I was still alive back then. As for the other matters, he's just too half-hearted. He's too used to using the past experiences. It's not like he isn't intelligent, but rather that he can't be bothered to use it. Klein couldn't help but sigh. Mobit was taken aback for 2 seconds before he drank a mouthful of hard liquor and said, "Old man appears to be an ordinary elder at home. He's a bit naggy and likes to throw blows at his descendants and enjoy life. If one didn't know it ahead of time, no one would have guessed that he's a Secret One's angel. His aesthetic style is different from His Majesty's. He is absorbed over categories and emphasizes cleanliness and tidiness when facing enemies. He's good at trickery and often likes to finish off his enemies by making them break down. This is quite similar to how Old Man acted to date." Leonard nodded and asked, "Do you have his portrait? Or could I be carrying a portrait with me? It's not like I'm looking for anyone." Mobit shook his head in amusement. At this point, Leonard suddenly pointed to the side. "Isn't that it?" Mobit turned his head in confusion and doubt, only to discover that the oil painting had appeared in his right hand at some point in time. As he picked up the oil painting, a content on it gradually became clear, revealing the old man with dark brown eyes. The man's hair had already completely white. It wasn't very sparse, and it was neatly combed to the back of his head. His forehead and corners of his eyes and the corners of his mouth didn't seem to have any wrinkles, not appearing too old. It was obvious that he looked quite good when he was young. He looked quite similar to Mobit, but he exuded a rather solemn air. I really can't tell that is a Sequence 1 angel. Is that also because he didn't reveal his mythical creature form?" Audrey tiptoed and looked at the oil painting. After Leonard memorized the contents of the portal, he mentioned a few relative questions related to the Zoras family and received a satisfactory answer. The only exception was the name and the potion of the sequence 3 to 0. Mobit wasn't too sure. Either all he knew was the Sequence 1 and apparently Worm of Time. After ending this topic, Leonard asked about the Solomon Empire. "In your era, what major aristocratic family is there in the empire?" "There weren't many families with dukes." Mobit put down his cup and spread out his palm. "Our Zoras family, the Abraham family, the Zertal family, in addition, although the Medici family, the Lord Ouroboros, didn't have any aristocratic titles, their standing wasn't worse than the major aristocratic families." Every time he spoke, he would curl his finger, finally curling them into a fist. Then he smiled and said, "At the time, although Tudor and the Trunzen were the most loyal angels under His Majesty, they were still ranked beneath us, and they were par with the Augustus and Castilla. The history of the Augustus family can actually be traced to the era of the Solomon Empire." While Audrey was surprised, she became even more focused on listening. Leonard thought and continued asking, "In that era, what was the situation in the northern continent?" "All living creatures submitted to His Majesty. Even deities acknowledged His Majesty's rule in order to fight against opposing factions." Mobit chuckled. They all have countries that belong to them and powerful places. In short, every night goddess in combat and death were all at odds. The three deities of storm, blazing sun, and wisdom had a great conflict with each other's. Earth's attitude was vague and unclear, but she was more inclined towards the god of combat. This made them unable to cooperate a stable fashion, and thus being unable to form an alliance to fight His Majesty and the true creator. At this point, Mobit sighed and said, and precisely for the sake of his balance, His Majesty didn't attack the southern continent and allowed death to unite the Palm and ancient forest to build the Balam Empire. No, ultimately the six deities came to an agreement, hence the Black Emperor perished, establishing the Tudor-Trunza United Empire. Leonard recalled Palazoer's mention of the particular phase in history, and for a baffling reason felt how history was filled with not even gonna try. At that moment, Mobit turned his head to look at him. Do you have a cigarette? These little devils that came out of the true creator's believers aren't bad at all. Do you have a cigarette? These little devils that came out of the true creator's believers aren't bad at all. Leonard immediately controlled the dream to conjure a cigarette before handing it over. Is this an improvised version? Mobit stretched his right hand and snaked out a ball of fire from the kitchen behind the bar. He lit the cigarette and took a deep breath. Seeing smoke coming out of his nostril, Leonard asked curiously, the true creator's believers like to smoke. That's right, even Lord Medici would occasionally smoke a few sticks, although it's just a habit for him. Mobit answered without hiding anything. Leonard nodded and asked, which deity do you believe in? Of course, it's His Majesty. All the aristocrats in the Empire believe in His Majesty, other than Lord Medici and Of course, it's His Majesty. All the aristocrats in the Empire believe in His Majesty. Other than Lord Medici and Aurora Boreas, they believe in the true creator. Also, Duke Bethel Abraham might just be faking it. According to what I know, he only believes in himself. Bethel Abraham, a thought came to Klein. He was about to signal Leonard and ask further when he heard the poet ask, is Duke Bethel Abraham very powerful? Clearly, the completely different behavior compared to other aristocratic families in the Empire made the ancestors of the Abraham family stand out. Very powerful. Even Lord Medici and Aurora Boreas are afraid of him, Mobit said, and he puffed his smoke ring. In the warning era. Okay, I might be overanalyzing something. I just can't get over the thing where it's just like, can you pass me a... Do you have cigarette? It's like these little devils that came out of the true creator's believers aren't bad at all. But like, what do you mean by that? Like, did they not have cigarettes in this world? And then like, the true creator... But like his believer's the one that created it? Does that mean that the true... Yeah, I know. No, I'm not stupid. I understand that part. But I'm like, does that mean that the true creator was the one who influenced them creating cigarettes? Thought came to Klein. He was about to say, clearly, the completely different behavior compared to the other aristocratic families in the Empire made the ancestors of the Abraham family stand out. Very powerful. Even Lord... he was publicly acknowledged one of the angels most likely to become a deity. Very powerful. Even Lord Medici and Ouroboros are afraid of him, Mobit said as he puffed out the smoke rings. In the Warning Era, he was publicly acknowledged as one of the angels most likely to become a deity. Warning Era, Leonard asked curiously. Mobit looked at the slowly burning cigarette in his hand and said, "This isn't thrilling enough." The Warning Era refers to the time after the Cataclysm ended to the point where the Empire was established. It lasted about 112 years. Our Zoras family's first angel perished in the Warning Era. Thankfully, we were helped by Our Majesty before he became a god. Thus, we didn't lose the Beyonder characteristic. Who did it? Leonard immediately asked. Mobit shook his head. I'm not sequence 4 yet, so there are many things I'm not qualified to know. Let's talk about Duke Bethel Abraham. I actually don't really know much about him, but I was very interested in their family and the Beyonder pathway they control. They said that the apprentice can ward the cosmos once they reach sequence 2. There are also rumors that it's a sequence 3, Cosmos. Klein's pupils dilated slightly and became more focused. At that moment, Mobit continued, they left behind lots of information regarding the cosmos, recording many interesting things. Unfortunately, I never managed to borrow them. However, I heard of the 3 laws that concluded for wandering the cosmos. First, don't respond to any calls. Second, don't be reckless and approach unknown creatures or buildings. Third, endure loneliness. It sounds like the cosmos is vast and dangerous. I wonder if the current Abraham family still has travel notes related to the cosmos. I'll get Miss... First, don't respond to any calls. Second, don't be reckless and approach unknown creatures or buildings. Third, endure loneliness. I'll get Miss Messenger to ask in the future. When Klein's gaze swept over, it happened to cross with Miss Messenger's gaze. That wasn't directly at him. They immediately realized that the other party had also thought of Miss Magician. Leonard did the same. He nodded slightly and asked about the other matters. During this process, the dream changed and Mobit's memories followed that. They saw the appearance of Medici, Ouroboros, and other high-level figures. They left behind lots of information. I'm going back really quick. They left behind lots of information regarding the cosmos, recording many interesting things. Unfortunately, I've never managed to borrow them. However, I heard 3 laws that concluded for wandering the cosmos. First, don't respond to any calls. Second, don't be reckless and approach unknown creatures or buildings. Third, endure loneliness. So who's up there? Does Klein go up there? Of course, as Mobit had few interactions with the Black Emperor or Bethel Abraham and didn't dare to look at them head-on, his impression of them was a blur. Towards the end, Audrey grabbed both Klein and Leonard's arms and jumped into Sidus's dream. What music are we going to now? Am I gonna be... No, can we not? Ugh, it's loading, but I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do this shit again. I just want, like, cool, like, plot and story stuff. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be sad. For a second time? For a second time? The elven songster was standing in the garden, holding her stomach. Frowning at Mobit, can you steal? Can you steal the fetus in my stomach and stuff it into your body? It can't be done, but even if it's stuffed into my body, I won't be able to give birth to him, Mobit replied fearfully. Sidus thought seriously and said, then steal the corresponding organs that are needed. If it's just that simple of act of thief, then I might still succeed, but for what follows after? I'll be at my wit's end. This is beyond my capabilities, Mobit said nervously. The conversation between the human and the elf left the trio dumbfounded. After a few seconds, Audrey suggested, why don't I do this time? Upon hearing Miss Justice's suggestion, Klein thought for a moment and said, guide the dream towards matter encompassing the second epoch history, the Queen of Calamity Cohenhan. Elf habits, and most ancient language of the elves, as well as the legendary Western continent. Alright, Audrey's eyes moved slightly, revealing the thoughtful expression. She digested the information that the world had said. Then she walked to the elven songster's side. Under her guidance, I never changed the chapter. Yeah, I'm updating right now. That was so mean. That's so actually just truly, truly mean. It looks so sad. Then she walked the elven songster's side. Under her guidance, Mobit figure in the garden rapidly blurred as he vanished from Sidus's dream. The ripples in Audrey's eyes stirred once again as her lips quivered as though she was reciting something. The entire dream world began to shake, and the garden was like a reflection of the lake that was smashed into pieces of an invisible stone and flew out over from nowhere. These fragments quickly gathered, but the scene was restored no longer a garden, but that of a palace made of coral. Every detail in the palace was abnormally gorgeous. The entire structure was tall and magical, but due to the layers of the blue seawater and sky couldn't be seen, making it appear dark and gloomy. Inside it, corporal pillars propped up an exaggerated dome, and the walls at the top of it were filled with terrifying murals of the storm. Above the murals of coral, silver bolts of lightning followed a certain trajectory as if they were alive. Finally, they converged at the 9 steps that were inlaid with pearls, diamonds, emeralds, and turquoise. Sidus was standing there with many elves standing opposite her. On the 9 steps there were 2 huge chairs that seemed to be formed purely of lightning. One of them occupied the center, just like the ruler of his place, one of them on the left appearing less eye-catching. Sitting on the throne in the middle was a man wearing a simple loose robe. His ears were pointed and his facial features were rather soft and his hair thick. His hair had a mix of black and blue colors. Not only did his facial features look outstanding on their own, they combed together to form even more handsome face. However, he directly gave one of the tyrannous impressions, as though he wouldn't say a word before picking up the electric spear, leaning on the armrest, and then throwing it. Beside him was a beautiful woman with raven black hair. Her hair was tied up into a high bun, her ears slightly pointed, and her facial features delicate. She had dark brown eyes and were as deep as the ocean. In her hand, she was playing with a complicated golden wine cup. Without needing Sidus's introduction, Klein and company could easily determine that the couple was the elf king and the ancient god Sinithrim, and the elf queen, Queen of Calamity Cohenhan, the traitor Armir. Suddenly, a voice resembled thunder loudly bloomed, causing the entire place to violently shake. Bye, Stan. Oh my god. It made Sidus and the other attendants lower their head in fear. This roar came from the ancient god. Armir isn't the name of the giant king. I've recently been drinking red wine named after him. I have to say that this quality is indeed higher than anything else. It's just a little expensive. As Klein listened to the random thought, he remembered that Little Sun had once said that giant king Armir, elf king Snithrim, and sanguine ancestor Lilith, the three humanoid ancient gods, were allies. They fought against the opposing camp formed by Dragon of Imagination Ankwelt, Phoenix ancestor Grey Grace, and the mutated king Kavaster. As for the devil monarch Farbayuti and the annihilation demonic wolf Lagrea, they were independent beings who wanted to subvert all orders and corrupt all living beings. So the alliance of the three humanoid ancient gods eventually collapsed. Klein reined in his thoughts and waited for the subsequent changes in their dreams. Due to Derek's existence, Audrey wasn't unfamiliar with the history of the Second Epoch. Without any hesitation, she directly made Sidus' dream continue its development. Despite the terrifying roar, Queen of Calamity Cohenheim wasn't affected at all. With a cold expression, she calmly said, "Wasn't this already long confirmed? His reputation is exactly the opposite of his physical build." At that moment, the ancient god, Sinithrum, had already been enveloped by bolts of lightning. He said in a thunderous voice, "I thought that after centuries he would understand the global situation even more. I've overestimated his intelligence. If he didn't sell out Lilith back then, how could she have perished?" The sanguine ancestor Lilith perished so early. Klein's eyelids twitched as he quickly focused his attention. After the Elf King finished roaring, Queen of Calamity Cohenheim maintained her previous posture and said, "That's not a bad thing. At the very least, Kavista and Flagrea were dragged to the grave together with Lilith. All the deities no longer trust each other. Even if we don't form an alliance, all we can do is rule the ocean, lakes, and rivers." Upon hearing these words, spectator Audrey couldn't help but feel alarmed. She had no choice but to use placate on herself. It means that the sanguine ancestor Lilith, mutated king, and the annihilation demonic wolf perished in the battle between ancient gods. So the betrayal of giant king Armir and the other ancient gods had nothing to do with the ancient sun god. This is why Lilith didn't fully die and is still able to occasionally deliver divine revelations. And because of this, the Antigonus, mother of the sky and Hornicus mountain range, managed to survive the Fourth Epoch. Klein increasingly believed that the history recorded in the City of Silver had many fabrications or vague records. Thankfully, he hadn't completely digested the bizarre sorcerer potion and didn't need to consider advancing to Scholar of Yore, otherwise the history he used might not be real. In ancient times, the sanguine ancestor Lilith and mutated king Kavistar perished due to others. The sanguine had recently been working with the mutants' temperance faction. Time sure is great. If the moon Emlin were to know of this, I wonder what kind of expression he would have. The star Leonard sighed as he thought. As their thoughts raced, the ancient god Sinithrum scoffed and said, "Recently Armir wanted to work with some secret sects that have sprouted from the humans to deal with us. Apparently this matter is led by Harvest and Dawn." "I'm even thinking of working with Ankwelt to destroy the giants and the Giant King's court. Unfortunately, every time I see that dragon, I have the urge to string it up on the grill. It's a type of attraction that's simply irresistible." Just as he said that, the ancient gods suddenly vanished. The entire palace shook violently, causing a rift to appear. All of this had yet to subside when a bolt of lightning flashed and a throne returned to the massive throne, holding a spear made of pure lightning. "You went to the Giant King's court?" Cohenheim asked. "I taught Armir a lesson," Snithrim answered without hiding anything. Sidus and the other elven attendants lowered their head even further. They faintly saw slippery tentacles that were thicker than their bodies flipping about on the ground, flashing with silver bolts of lightning. Then they shut their eyes. The dream changed and Sidus recalled her interactions with other elves. This was the conversation and interactions Klein, Leonard, and Audrey learned that Sidus lived a relatively peaceful time period in the Second Epoch. The giants, elves, dragons, devils, and phoenixes coexisted, splitting up their rule rule over the northern and southern continent, as well as the 5 seas. Vampires, demonic wolves, tree ants, sea monsters, mutants, and humans were vassals from different factions occupying lower middle classes. This doesn't resemble the history recorded by the church. Even the legends of the city of Silver aren't like this. Leonard sighed when he heard that old man probably doesn't know this much. That isn't necessarily true. Klein shook his head indiscernibly. Many existences in the second epoch have survived to the fourth epoch, or even to the very moment. For example, the wisdom angel. Klein asked in a guess. Perhaps. Klein didn't give an affirmative answer, and he said with a smile, "When you were talking to Mobit, I thought you would make Miss Justice stand further away." Leonard immediately shot a glance at him and yawned. "You mentioned before that there's an existence behind me that might have seen the second blasphemy slate. Then, when I was conversing with Mobit Zorast, wouldn't she be able to make the connection from me getting her to stand further away? Besides, you also mentioned that back when dealing with all the Mon's avatars in Backlund, part of the cleanup operation involved Miss Justice. To a Sequence 5 spectator, what she knows is sufficient. Once she understands the Zorast family's matters, the truth is practically in front of her eyes. In that case, why waste time trying to avoid her? It's too troublesome. I might as well get Mr. Fool to be witness to everyone vows not to divulge each other's secrets." Klein nodded slightly and said, "If you were to get Miss Justice to stand further away, it wouldn't be easy for you to bring up the matter of making a vow to keep things a secret." At this moment, Sidus continued, "After the death of the sanguine ancestor, the annihilation demonic wolf, and the mutated king, some of their subsidiary gods were killed, while others surrendered to other ancient gods. There were a few who vanished as they hid in the shadows. Having transformed herself into an elf, Audrey immediately asked who surrendered to who died. Sidus recalled and said, "I've never even seen it before. The Sanguine's goddess of life and the mutant king's god of war were killed. No one even remembers their names. The annihilation demonic wolf god is dead. Salinger came under the phoenix ancestor. The Sanguine's goddess of beauty, Arnia, came under us. The mutant king's god of spiritual creatures, Tolsna, an annihilation demonic wolf goddess of misfortune, Amenissis, vanished. Salinger, Arnia, these two names made Klein's forehead twitch as he instinctively used clown powers to maintain his facial expression. Arnia was the Blood Moon Queen, the wife of the Fourth Epoch's Emperor, and the Empress of the Trunzen Empire. As for Salinger, he was the founder of the Balam Empire and the Emperor of the Underworld, Death." No, why did we go back to Cosmos Wanderer? Killing myself. Interesting. The second epoch subsidiary gods truly are hidden powers. There was the Dragon of Wisdom, Herbergen, and there's gods of the dead Salinger. They were all powerful figures that even reached the throne of Sequence 0. Of course, it can't be sure about the Dragon of Wisdom. It's quite possible. Yes, and that's the god of dawn, Badhail, and the goddess of harvest, Omabella. I can't rule out the possibility that they have lived quite well all the way to the fifth epoch. I wonder if the god of spiritual creatures, Talsna, and the goddess of misfortune, Amenenses, managed to evade the authority relative operation by the city of Silver Creator at the end of the second epoch. If they managed to escape that fate, what roles did they play in the third and fourth epoch? After a moment of shock, Klein began thinking poignantly. Thinking back to the betrayal of the King of Angels in the third epoch, he couldn't help but lampoon. You have to be careful of fire, theft, and subsidiary gods. At that moment, Audrey, who didn't know much about the subsidiary gods' true names or authorities, didn't show many perturbations in her emotion. She acted differently female. What the fuck is on my foot? Ow. Audrey, who didn't know much about the subsidiary gods' true names or authorities, didn't show many perturbations in her emotion. She acted as different female elves in Sidus's memory, and she constantly talked to her about her experiences. She knew about the Second Epoch. According to Sidus, in the history of the elves, there is no concept of the First Epoch or Second. According to Sidus, in the history of elves, there is no concept of the First Epoch or Second Epoch. In the beginning years, they were unknown to her. It was chaotic, dark, and crazy, and it didn't leave behind any text. After the supernatural races obtained a certain level of intelligence and had their own languages, creatures finally had some knowledge of history. In the era, ancient gods appeared one after another. The sky, the land, the sea, and the underground world slowly changed from disorderliness to orderliness. Stupid words. However, other than the tyrannical and crazy ancient gods, no one knew how many years this stage lasted. She just knew that very, very long ago it was referred to by the major supernatural races as the Sprouting Era. After the Sprouting Era was the early era of fire, in which the eight ancient gods fought against each other in different camps. This was also a long time before Sidus's birth, so she could only understand this from the elven historical records, that it was a time when quasi-human fought non-humans, resisting the corruption and intrusion from the devils and demonic wolves. Amongst them, the humanoids were the giants, elves, sanguine, as well as their slaves. The early era of fire lasted different periods of time according to the different records. However, a common point was that it lasted less than 1,000 years, as the essence of the ancient gods was madness, tyranny, cruel, and cold. They were often driven by their instincts. After the sanguine ancestor Lilith mutilated King Cavus and the annihilation demonic wolf Phlegrea perished during the betrayal, the early elm of fire ended and the war broke out. Oh, so they died before. The world was damaged and it didn't stop for centuries. Due to the fact that the giants and the dragons were reevaluating strong in this period of time, they were known as the Dual Era. By that time, the 5 races formed a new balance of power. The northern continent, the southern continent, and east continent, and the 5 seas had recovered some level of peace. This was when Sidus was born and had grown up in until she entered Grozel's travels. In the history that she described, there were 2 important points. First of all, it provided the existence of the East Continent, a place where the Giant King's court was. Second, after the Sprouting Era, the supernatural races had their own kind of civilization. They weren't completely irrational descendants believed them to be, of course. Is there a West Continent? Because there's North, South, East. Did they make a West Continent or no? Existed as though they were all in a half state of losing control. It was only after the Dual Era that the new generation of elves and giants gained some level of rationality. They had feelings like the Sidus and Grozel. The East Continent seemed to be the forsaken land of the gods. It was abandoned during the Cataclysm. Similarly, thoughts surfaced, inclined Leonard's and Audrey's mind. They were very interested in this, but it was a pity that Sidus had always lived in the Elf King's court. Their occasional forays outside were limited to the paradise at sea. She had never been to the East Continent, and she lacked the required knowledge. Under Audrey's influence, Sidus's dream began to show the traditional language of the elves. According to the legend, the queen's attendant had heard of Elvish was created by the king of the Sprouting Era. Every word was produced with the birth of a first-generation elf. The number of the Elvish words meant that the number of the first-generation elves. However, the tradition of the elves weren't too unified. They relied heavily on their surroundings. The elves of the forest and the sea were undoubtedly different in all kinds of customs. What they shared in common was that they believed in the king, who was the ancient god, and his queen. They liked to make food with the blood of their prey. Many of them had culinary methods, such as roasting Even sea elves often came up with the reefs for a bonfire party. They were close to nature and they were good at using all kinds of spices. They idolized the strong and they were proud of being quick to act before thinking. With myths and reality mixed together, it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. Their traditions have destroyed my previous theories. Klein listed with a stoic expression, he quickly analyzed every word Sidus said. After figuring out the relative matters, Audrey circled around the key word of the West Continent and made Sidus's dream change. It reflected some of her subconscious memories. The Coral Palace appeared before Klein and the company again. Sidus followed behind Queen and Calamity Cohenheim and walked to side crystal windows. She glanced at the queen's exquisite and complicated dress, and she stole a glance at the deity who controlled Calamity. She asked curiously, "Your Highness, are you looking west?" To the elves, as long as they didn't feel the pressure of violence, they would ask questions on the spot. "Why do you think so?" Cohenheim didn't turn back as she asked an indifferent question. "I just learned of a legend that our elves originated from the Western Continent." Sidus replied, "Your Highness, does the Western Continent really exist? Is that really where the first generation of elves were born?" Cohenheim's lip curled. Is anybody actually from this world? Cohenheim's lips curled silently as she said with a silent, ethereal voice, "The Western Continent may exist, but it may not exist either. Every race needs to give themselves an illusion origin, a home for their mind." Sidus, where are you home? I'm like, is anybody actually from here? "Where's your home to now?" "My home." Sidus repeated the question as she replied blankly. "It's where His Majesty and Your Majesty are. It's a place that can lead to the forest where my parents live." As she said this, Sidus motions. No, I'm just saying, like, what's this magical Western Continent? That's what I'm like. What's this magical like Western continent that they're talking about that Roselle was looking for and he couldn't find? And then I keep getting stuck on this whole like I have a question about, okay, this might be really fucking stupid. You know, okay, I gotta go back. I don't remember what chapter it was. I think it was chapter 1065, where we were learning about, like, the cosmos and stuff. And they were just like, oh, I've gotta go back now. So you know how it was, like, watch out in the cosmos? For, like... No, literally, I'm, like, reading this, and I'm like, this is literally just Lord of the Rings. I can't remember what it's called. What the place is where the elves go after they die. I'm forgetting it right now. The elves and Gimli. And Frodo. And I'm pretty sure Bilbo went there too, but yeah. It was obvious that she wasn't influenced by her subconscious corresponding memories, as she entered Grozo's travels and had been away from home for 2,000-3,000 years. Therefore, to elves like you, the Western continent doesn't exist. Yeah, it's like it's something like that. I can't remember what it is. Western continent doesn't exist, but to some elves it definitely exists. Queen and Calamity Cohenheim calmly gave her final answer. Sidus didn't ask further because she suddenly remembered that the queen wasn't a first-generation elf. What? Such a response made Klein increasingly confused and puzzled. Same, Klein. My home, Sidus repeated the question. It is where His Majesty and Your Majesty are. It's the palace that can lead to the forest where my parents live. As she said this, Sidus' emotionally gradually turned heavier, lost and melancholic. It was obvious that she wasn't influenced by her subconscious corresponding memories. She had entered Grozo's travels and had been away from home for 200-300 years. Therefore, to elves like you, the Western continent doesn't exist, but to some elves, it definitely exists. Queen of Calamity Cohenheim calmly gave her first answer. So I'm wondering, like, I guess... Valinor, that's what it was, thank you. So I'm guessing her parents came from the West, or like her parents, I don't know how elven culture works. I'm assuming it's her parents. Came from the Western continent. Such a response made Klein increasingly confused and puzzled. Thankfully, from the second epoch to the fifth epoch, the Western continent had zero presence, so it didn't have any important secrets related to him. I feel like that's incorrect. He was just trying to figure out more about it, and hadn't held out much hope. After ending the guiding of Sidus subconsciously, and since it was almost noon without any other nearby dreams that they could leap into, Audrey left with Klein and Leonard, and they appeared in Mobit in Sidus's bedroom. Looking at the fourth epoch Viscount, whose body had been tightly bound by an elf, Audrey's expression suddenly turned gentle as she said with a laugh, "They seem to be doing pretty well. No, it's terrifying to have such a violent, direct, and imaginative wife who dares to take action. Only a person like Mobit would like and enjoy being with her." Leonard, who didn't have a poet's talent, but had the liberal inclination of a poet, shook his head as he kept his hands in his pockets. At this point, he muttered in thought, "On the contrary, it's true that the experienced thief needs a woman like Sidus to rein him in. I wonder what kind of members of the opposite sex old man's other family members are like. They don't need our envy or objection. This is how they live together." And Brozel once wrote a poem saying, "For my love, I'll sacrifice my life." As Klein listened to their discussion, he opened his mouth and closed it again. He didn't tell them that Sidus and Mobit had actually died. So rude. It was only when they died that they truly felt their love for one another. The ones living in the book were just copies created by the book world. After leaving the couple's house, the trio headed to Grozel's blacksmith's shop. Along the way, when they went past the street, Klein saw Frunziar, who was known as the philosopher, and Audrey recognized him to be Loanese at glance. "Is that the soldier from 100 years ago?" Audrey slowed down her pace and asked. Klein recalled Frunziar's longing for his hometown and ashes to be placed in a Blackland cemetery. He fell silent for 2 seconds and nodded gently yes. The world is feeling a little emotional. He's like a calm river on the surface with a lot of undercurrents and eddies underneath. Audrey nodded indiscernibly and asked, "Can we enter his dream? I want to get a judge and disciplinary paladin's potion formula." "No problem," Klein repeated as he glanced at Leonard. Leonard continued having his hands in pockets, but his eyes instantly darkened. Sitting on the bench, Frunzier fell asleep. Right on the heels of that, 3 people around in his dream, and this was the busy city of the businesses from wood. Pedestrians who came and went were mostly Loanese. The black-haired, blue-eyed Frunzian stood outside a house as he looked in without daring to approach. Only when a woman wearing a long dress came out from inside did he exactly go outward to attempt hugging her. His hug went through the woman without them making contact at all. Frunzier stood up, rotated the ground, and blankly shouted, "Mother!" Audrey, who wanted to guide the dream, quickly watched this scene. Then she looked around and discovered the iconic clock. Backland. Audrey pursed her lips and turned her head. She looked at Klein and asked, "Can they leave the book world?" "It's been too long. If they leave, they'll grow old and die and even be reduced to dust." I delivered one of Frunzian's items to Backland. This, as a spectator, Audrey acutely sensed the cruel reality behind those words. She couldn't help but raise her head and look out of the dream, looking at the location where Mobit and Sidus were. Leonard wanted to ask what it was, but after looking around, he maintained his silence. Oh my god, okay. Following that, Audrey seriously guided his dream. Outside of obtaining 2 potion formulas, she made Frunzier return home and live happily with his parents, brothers, and sisters. It was a beautiful dream. After leaving Frunzier, Klein, Leonard, and Audrey quickly saw Grozel's home. This was the last stop on their exploration. After obtaining information of Grozel's subconsciousness, they would enter the book world's sea of collective subconsciousness and seek out the secrets that might exist in this book, adapted from the Hungarian poet and her prelate Liberty of Love. Oh my god, I've already been doing this for over 2 hours. This might be my last chapter. Which one is Grozel? In the dream, Leonard looked ahead blankly. There was a huge bonfire there, and there were more than 10 grayish blue-skinned, single-eyed giants who looked no different from each other. To be honest, you would recognize him without the ability of Faceless. To me, without their age, hairstyles, and height, scar, clothes, and maturity, giants all looked the same. Klein mumbled inwardly, looked calmly at Miss Justice, and thought, saying that it wouldn't stop a spectator. Audrey raised her hand and pointed to the giant who was gulping down alcohol from time to time. He would shout twice to express his approval. That's Grosel. It looks like the traditions of the giants clapping isn't a sign of affirmation and praise. Instead, it's a roar. The louder the roar, the higher the level of praise. Miss Justice is acting like a folk scholar now. Thankfully, he's only shouting and not singing. If not, the noise would be worse. It's obvious that the giants here are adept to molding their voices. The roar from before didn't have any rhyme to it. Klein nodded and said to Audrey, begin guiding him then. As Audrey went forward, as Leonard stepped back, he raised his right hand and stroked his chin. Tell me, in the second epoch, which supernatural race widely possessed the beyond characteristics of Evernight Pathway? Isn't it the demonic wolves? Klein glanced at Leonard, wondering if the poet had contracted the traditional disease of Nighthawk, say, having bad memory. I know, Leonard maintained his original posture as he said with a strange expression. Then how do they act as a midnight poet? Or should I say that the potion's name back then was called Midnight Roar? There wasn't a potion name in the beginning. Klein's thoughts were accidentally led astray by Leonard. The scene of such fellows crouching on the ground and howling at the moon surfaced in his mind. He couldn't help but mutter, this might be more suitable for you. There's no need to write poems, making it very easy. The corners of Leonard's mouth twitched as he said, there are different types of poets. I'm a singing type. As the two idly chatted, Audrey glanced attempt gradually pushed through. Grosel's dream began slowing. The waning forest, burn tunnel, and corner of the Giant King's court, Dawn Town, and Nation of Gold. Grosel wasn't subordinate of the deities like the Giant King, and he was only able to occasionally see these high-level existences while on duty at the waning forest or particular spots of the Giant King's. I'm not gonna say I see it again, but I don't see it as little as I saw it from last section's chapters. Them head on receiving them while genuflecting and having his head bowed. Therefore, he wasn't able to present the images of Giant King Armir, Giant Queen Obella, and their eldest son, Giant King God of Dawn, Badhail. They only appeared as portraits. Similarly, Grosel knew very few secrets. His grasp of history and his situation in the world was completely incomparable to the elven songster Citus. However, an interesting point was that in the Giant King's court and the giants of the traitor was synopsis with Sinithrum. They claimed that his abandoning of the alliance was resulted in the sanguine ancestor Lilith's death. Klein strongly suspected that because of his bad temper, Sinithrum was obviously not good at such things. The Queen of Calamity seems capable, but the problem is what she plots is extremely hard to hide from her spouse, a true ancient god Sinithrum. In contrast with Giant King Armir being a traitor makes more sense. Klein did a rough analysis as Audrey changed the direction of guidance in the attempt to let Grosel present anything he had seen or heard about beyond the Giant King's court. It was a pity that shortly after the giant left the King's court and passed through the Dawn Town before arriving at the Nation of Gold, he obtained the book and entered it. He didn't know much about the styles and appearances of people of different regions. Currently, the most valuable piece of information is how to avoid the front entrance after entering the Giant King's court from Afternoon Town. It's through the waning forest and the barren tunnel. Audrey ended the guidance and walked back to Klein and Leonard's side. This is very useful for Little Sun and Company's subsequent explorations. Yes, we can tell him at the next gathering, Klein nodded. Just as he was about to suggest that they enter the book's world sea of the collective subconscious through Grosel's dreams, Audrey suddenly looked back and said in thought, there's one detail that's illogical. Which detail? Leonard seriously recalled what he had seen and heard, but he didn't find anything suspicious. Just as Audrey glanced at the world and said, in the matter regarding to how Giant King Armir's father and mother are buried in the waning forest, the rule that the ancient god can enter is illogical. The rule that only the ancient god can enter is illogical. Klein didn't notice that there was something wrong with the detail, but after Miss Justice mentioned it, he immediately had some ideas. He deliberately said the father and mother of the Giant King are equivalent to the ancestors of the giants. Normally speaking, they should be considered by the entire race. Consecrated by the entire race. That's right, regardless of the race, they'll have some level of worship towards their ancestor. The giants are no exception. From Grozel's dream, the keepers often make sacrifices to the ancestors outside of the waiting forest. Audrey nodded in agreement. If there aren't any factors of influence, the Giant King should occasionally organize things and make it a point to honor their ancestors instead of making it a rule that only he can enter. Perhaps the waiting forest contains immense danger. Aren't the older giants crazy, violent, and irrational? After their death, their corpses have corrupted the environment and affected the entire forest. It's not something that can't be understood. Leonard gave his opinion. Audrey and Klein shook their head at the same time, denying the statement. If it's only danger or corruption, Giant Queen Amabella and the God of Dawn, Badhill, can clearly withstand it. With the help of the Giant King, there were almost no problems, yet they are also forbidden from entering the waiting forest, even with the ancient god by their side. Klein simply exhaled his thoughts and guessed. Perhaps it's buried inside isn't Giant King Armia's parents. There might be some other secret. That's more likely the case, Audrey nodded seriously. She wore a silver mask and her green eyes darted around slightly, fainting, revealing a hint of curiosity. If that's the case, what would a secret that can't be known to his wife, child, subsidiary gods, or fellow members of the same race be? That's quite interesting. Leonard smiled as he allowed his thoughts to wander. After another round of discussions, the three of them made use of time to enter the Giant King's court through the barren tunnel and enter the place that was frozen amidst the sunset. According to Klein's experience, it was actually the path to the borders of Grozel's dream. This time, there was no need for him to activate creeping hunger and use the strength of a zombie to open the heavy door to the giant guard's quarters. Audrey directly influenced the dream and made the door flutter open like a piece of paper. Due to the unshadowed crucifix, Klein was unable to wear the human skin glove. Outside the door was a hazy world. There was no longer a scene of the Giant King's court ahead of them, but a cliff. After a brief exchange of various situations that could occur in the sea of collective subconscious, Audrey made a staircase appear at the edge of the cliff. The staircase spun around, sinking deep into the dark, hazy, silent at the bottomless mind world. Okay, maybe we'll do some more chapters. The three of them didn't delay as they stepped onto the staircase and walked down. In the lonely environment that could drive one crazy, Audrey used placate a few times every time they traveled a certain distance. This wasn't only to placate Klein, Leonard, and herself, but it was also to placate the grayish-white cliff, Grozel's subconscious. It was to prevent him from causing a stir that would contaminate their astral projection and body of heart and mind. The countless rotting giant palm of Klein encountered the last time he didn't appear. Even the most unbearable feelings of loneliness, silence, and being infinite didn't feel that terrifying thanks to him being able to speak to each other. This is the mind world. The domain of consciousness is indeed different from others. Leonard looked around as he thought. He wanted to use a few poems to express his feelings, but he eventually chose to give up. If it weren't for the other missions elsewhere, Klein might have asked his dear poet to remain quiet, but here he felt that it was good for him to say something, anything. Audrey didn't reject the exchange or see seriously. That's the essence of the environment that we can sense. The cliff's precipice and the hazy world are a reflection of the subconscious. If it were any other race, it might not be like that. I now find psychology rather interesting, Leather said with an interest after hearing that. Klein glanced at him and just the urge to say that, with his personality and habits, I really wish suited for the spectator pathway. He really wasn't suited for the spectator pathway. In this exchange, the three of them lost track of time as they finally stepped onto the solid but hazy ground. Looking upwards, they could see the undulating shadows. They overlapped the formed of illusory sea. Leonard, Klein, and Audrey were about to walk forward when water spouted, suddenly surging over. A rather blurry figure stood up from within. I'm changing it. Is something like crazy gonna happen? Stood up from within. It was a grayish blue giant that was 6 to 7 meters tall. His chest was covered with dragon scales, and there was all sorts of incredible symbols and labels that went beyond what one could consider language. His single vertical eye was filled with blood vessels as it emanated a violent aura that couldn't be concealed. It had an obvious sense of destruction, and it was gnawed on a bloody human leg. This was a demigod-level giant. He was a projection left of the sea's collective subconscious. Perhaps it was the actual encounter with a human or some other race ancestor. Perhaps it was something Grozel and the other giants had heard about. The moment he appeared, the madness spread towards Klein and company like a plague that could infect them. This was the world that directly came into contact with one's mind and consciousness. Did it give a lot of lag? The three-legged gnawing on the giant, the leg-gnawing giant whose vertical eye was filled with blood threads was actually real. He was in essence a strong, emotionally produced, particularly living creature. The emotions that originated from having a deep impression of entered the subconscious. It spread from one island of consciousness to the surrounding illusory sea before slowly settling and forming a mark. It wasn't possible for all the emotions to consciousness to ultimately settle doughy by the seawater. Only extremely intense and related experience would remain. As once it formed a mark, it would drop the water and sea, a collective subconscious which then affected living creatures of the same species and surroundings. It would shared ancient memories carved into impulse. Therefore, not only was the phantom image of the giant blurry, but it also had many mistakes caused by the subject aspects of the mind. Normally, it would result in Leonard and Audrey being unable to look straight at it, confused, seeing their spirituality and breaking down their minds. However, the madness that came with it, an extreme sense of horror and stemmed from an unknown person, seemed also real. It contaminated every living creature's body of heart and mind, astral projection, and even soul body. This was the essence of danger in the sea of collective subconsciousness. It didn't stem from strength, level, or status itself, but from the emotions and feelings that were generated from and imprinted there. Of course, if one were to encounter the mark left behind from the high-level creature or deity, they could directly see some type of multiple types of mythical creature forms. However, the result was definitely nothing rosy. One would either have to mentally break down or go crazy, otherwise they would be completely contaminated by the level of high-level creatures' emotional and feeling. Their outcome would immediately be completely unpredictable. All in all, the sea of collective subconscious and style of combat was definitely different from the outside world. Sometimes it was more anxious. One was trying to destroy the illusory figure. The more likely one would be contaminated by their stirring emotions. It was precisely because of this that Klein saw the 7 to 8 meter tallish gray blue giant rush over. He immediately took the initiative to control his emotions. Then he used illusion creation. The target of illusion creation was Leonard and Audrey. In the eyes of these two Sequence 5 Beyonders, those 2 to 3 story tall giants no longer had the badness and violence that left one trembling from one's heart. Everything seemed normal and ordinary. Therefore, before those extreme feelings could turn contaminated them, Leonard and Audrey remained very calm without showing any emotional fluctuations. Then, with one hand in the pocket, Leonard reached out in his right hand and slightly opened his mouth. After becoming spirit warlike, he originally wanted to use the first spirit, a terrorist banshee. Then he sealed his tooth with the help of the archbishop. It was a powerful spirit world creature with his beautiful face and rotting body. It had a pair of huge eagle wings and was good at draining the consciousness of others, injecting fear and terror in them. However, he quickly remembered that not only was he in an astral projection form, but he had also been cleansed by the very fog. How could he be the other spirit still on him? He had no choice but to use soul assured powers, turning his green eyes deep and quiet. The giant shadow instantly slowed down as if it was soothed. By that moment, Audrey calmly spread her arms wide and used placate. An invisible wind blew past. The giant figure seemed to pause. It was instantly weakened and contamination around it. During this process, Klein took a bronze cross and had sharp spikes. He opened the bottle containing his blood and poured a few drops onto it and solemnly said, "Light." Pure, bright, and flawless lights burst out amidst Klein's fluttering black trench coat. The giant phantom was drowned by the light. The grayish-blue giant melted away and almost immediately. One of the main powers of the unshadowed crucifix was to cleanse the purifying lingerie spirit imprints. This was the reason why Klein brought the sealed artifact along, and when he was the cross ancient sun god, Klein dispelled the illusion, allowing the star Leonard and Justice Audrey to see the true appearance of the giant to enrich their experiences in such matters. Although it didn't even take a second before the giant's phantom was drowned by the endless lights, Audrey and Leonard still felt dizzy. Irresistible sense of fear surged from deep within their hearts as they almost broke down. This state didn't last too long as Audrey instinctively used placate to calm her emotions before treating Mr. Star and Mr. World's psychological problems one by one. How scary. Is this a giant of the demigod level? When the light dissipated, Audrey looked around and sighed. In an instant, she had a deeper understanding of the sentence, do not look directly at God. Even at the same level, the remnant impression of the demigod leaves many in memories, can't be seen directly, let alone real deity. Leonard was also experienced. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said sequence 4 is indeed a qualitative change in life's natural order. However, that wasn't very scary. It wasn't as intense as when I was facing a pregnant woman. No fair. Is the essence of the poet to boast. At that time, you could still control yourself, but you were almost on the verge of breaking down. Just now, however, if Magos gave birth to that child, we would probably lose control and turn into monsters just by looking at her. As Klein lampooned, Leonard has stirred up some memories, as he said poignantly. Was the pregnant lady a demigod? Audrey asked curiously. No, Leonard shook his head, but she was pregnant with an evil god's spawn. Is that so? Audrey didn't ask further. She knew very well that the adventure and exploration had ended, and that wasting time wasn't an option. She then looked at Gairman Sparrow, who was wearing a black trench coat and holding a bronze cross and a small bottle, and said with a smile, thank you for affecting our senses. Where should we go next? As an experienced spectator, it wasn't difficult to determine the fact that she had received Mr. World's help from making a comparison. Klein controlled himself to subconsciously furrowed his brows as he looked around. Doesn't the sea of collective subconscious have a core region to it? No. Audrey shook her head seriously. Wherever there are living beings, there's a sea of subconscious. There's no such thing as someone who is more important or lofty. The illusory sea won't really stir, and the situations within different areas will depend on their actual surroundings. We'll call it a precipitating effect. To put it simply, the sea of collective subconscious of Lowen will be quite different from Intis, because the precipitates. Why can I not say this word? Precipitants. Oh my god, no, that's not even the word. The strong emotions and feelings of generations of Loanese. I know. In contrast, this will also affect the citizens of both countries, making them have different qualities and personalities to a certain extent. After explaining this a little, Audrey concluded, if that's the case, how can there be a general consensus over the core within the sea of collective subconscious? Klein nodded and asked thoughtfully, in other words, you can't give an effective suggestion on where we to go. Mr. World is so direct. If I were another lady or gentleman with more fragile heart, there would definitely be embarrassed and feelings hurt. As the thoughts flashed through her mind, Audrey saw the world's pair of deep brown eyes, which were nearly black in the color. They were no way crazy or cold, instead they were calm and tranquil. Audrey instantly came to the realization. She realized that Mr. World was doing such things on purpose, that he could experience the various problems within the details of a joint operation, allowing her to gain more experience. Yes, Audrey nodded frankly, not feeling embarrassed at all. Me neither, Audrey. Klein secretly nodded and asked to the star Leonard, don't look at me. My expertise isn't in a strange sea of collective subconsciousness. Leonard immediately waved his hands. Compared to Miss Justice having participated in countless operations, he knew that he shouldn't force it when he shouldn't. Then follow me. Klein looked away and moved the unshadowed crucifix, which had turned bronze again, and hand holding the metal bottle as he looked at the gold coin. Ding! As the gold coin tumbled, he grabbed it without looking at the results. He looked at the direction, widened his stride. This is a divination technique. Audrey was enlightened. She looked at the world seriously and calm, side profile, black trench coat, silk top hat, and bronze cross. For some reason, she felt like the other party was a preacher. Don't say it. Leonard suddenly recalled something from the past. It was the first case he had worked with Klein to find a kidnapped child. At the same time, he was also a way for Klein to lead the way through divination. He had been beside him the entire time. Compared to his awkwardness before, it seemed as if he had entered the mysterious world for more than 10 years now. It's only been a year. Leonard placed his hands in his pockets as he followed closely behind Klein. Oh, dude, he just misses his boy so much. He just wants him back. And you know what? I don't even blame him. For that. I don't even blame him for just wanting his boy back. Audrey glanced at him and felt the change in his mood. Mr. Star and Mr. World not only know each other in real life, but they're probably rather close friends. Yes, they have at least met frequently in the past 1 to 2 years. Clock their shit, Audrey. As she made the judgment, she didn't slow down her steps. Combining what she had learned, she observed the surroundings and identified which spots might hide maelstroms or dangerous creatures. With her help, Klein led the way. Went very smoothly. It was like nothing. It was like nothing like how they had directly encountered the mark like a giant phantom. Occasionally, they would walk straight and turn at other times. After some time, the area before the trio suddenly opened up. In front of them was a huge crater in the deep sea. In the middle of the pit was an island-sized city. The foundation of the city was grayish-white in color, and on it were several 100-meter-tall, magnificent stone columns. They either stood there on their own, or they held up majestic ancient palaces together. They were bizarre and magnificent, unlike something built in the ordinary creatures. Although Audrey didn't know the city, the idea appeared to her in her mind. The City of Miracles, Livestead. Ooh. No, the corruption is kind of hitting again. You know what? I think for a while there, I was in the darkness. I'm starting to see the light again. You know, I'm starting to see the light. I'm starting to be like, yeah, maybe. But we'll see. You know, we'll see. Nysa was a floating city that the dragon of imagination and Kowalt imagined out of thin air. No matter what, it was the miracle of divine miracle. It was even more magnificent than the giant king's court, more rugged and unique. Every stone pillar was nearly 100 meters tall, like the throne for a dragon to rest on. It was a city that left a deep, unforgettable impression just from hearing about it. I'm doing 2 more chapters. I figured I might as well finish it. I'll do 2 more chapters. So this is the second to last chapter. Therefore, although Audrey had never actually seen the City of Miracles, she instantly made connections from witnessing the scene. Of course, one of the main reasons for knowing that was because she knew that Grozel's travels came from the Dragon of Imagination, Ankawell. As for Klein, as he had once dived the origins of Grozel's travels and had seen the real City of Miracles, the floating city, and now he was sure that the island-sized city in the middle of the deep sea. What happens in chapter... Oh, okay. Do I want to do a chapter 1071? Was identical to Livestead. All it lacked were the dragons that flew in every direction. Is this real, or is this a clone? Is it a gathering or some special creature subconscious in the book world? Klein was suddenly surprised as he quickly analyzed the situation. According to divination results in the contents of the dream from the giant king, guardian Grozel, Evan Songster's Saida, he was certain that the Grozel's travel was created. The City of Miracles Livestead still existed. When it reached the Giant King's court, the City of Miracles Livestead still existed. When it reached the Giant King's court, the City of Miracles Livestead still existed. I read that 3 times. Oh my god, I read that 3 fucking times. When Grozel began his adventure and when Saida was stuck into the book world, Livestead still existed. If the City of Miracles Livestead were to banish the various supernatural races, wouldn't have any reaction. Oh my god. In other words, these facts were unable proof that the city in the middle of the deep sea crater was unlike the Livestead. The middle of the deep sea crater was unlike... Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I just need 1 second. I actually think my brain is like... Oh my god. What the fuck was that? But very quickly, Klein remembered something. This was the answer that a Rhodes had once given him. Certain that if first appeared among the dragons after the disappearance of the City of Miracles, Livestead. I fucking hate this city now so much. This is interesting. What did the magic mirror rely to confirm that Grozel's travel was the first to appear and believe that it was after the disappearance of the City of Miracles Livestead? It wasn't able to see matters related to Zeratil, so how could it pry into the... I'm now getting PTSD from the City of Miracles live said. God's possession. I originally used this conclusion to interfere with the consider things, but at this point I was completely overturned by my divination. I never expected Klein observed the tall stone columns and magnificent city as many thoughts ran through his mind. Suddenly he grasped onto an idea. The last on Grozzo's travels, Vice Admiral Iceberg, had been a member of the Church of Knowledge. They believed in the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. The God of Knowledge and Wisdom can almost be confirmed to be one of the kings of angels who served the ancient sun god, the Angel of Wisdom. And from the Church's history and the history of the 30 Pockets, reasonable to suspect that the Angel of Wisdom was most likely the Dragon of Wisdom, Herabergen. This was the Dragon of Imagination, Ankelwelt's subsidiary god, a high-level member of the Dragons. This, the appearance of Grozzo's travels after the disappearance of the City of Miracles, was thanks to the God of Knowledge and Wisdom passing it around through a certain method which had convinced the magic mirrors if he really a Dragon of Wisdom, it means that he was directly involved in his level was already very high back then. His understanding of this matter definitely trumps the Grozzo and Citus, but how do I explain the scene I divined up of the gray fog? Just recalling it now makes my head ache. What I saw was definitely the ancient god, Dragon of Imagination himself. Klein cheered up when he managed to stir up all these matters together, but he also fell into a state of puzzlement. He tossed the gold coin continuously and quickly came up with some theories. Since the City of Miracle Livestead was imagined, couldn't it just be imagined after it disappeared? The original Livestead was stuffed into a book by the Dragon King Ankelwelt. Then, the one that subsequently existed was one he imagined again. This could fool all the dragons, but not the one that was known for being intelligent. If this were true, there would be actually two instances of the City of Miracles. The one here is the oldest one, but here comes a question. Why did the Dragon of Wisdom enter the book himself? Even if he wasn't a spectator, or his title being omniscient or omnipotent, he should have enough power to perform a deeper exploration. He has actually been here a long time ago and didn't alert any living beings of the book. Also, because of certain motives, he left the City of Miracles here. As thoughts surfaced in Clyde's mind, the star Leonard, who had both hands in his pocket, looked around him and then at Miss Justice, who had also been looking down in silence for a long time. He took the initiative to speak and break the silence. The city is grand and magnificent. It clearly doesn't belong to humans or humanoid creatures, but there's no need to stare at it for so long. You're not an architect after all. Klein gathered his thoughts and glanced at Leonard. This might very well be the Dragon of Imagination Ankelwelt City of Miracles Livestead. In a sense, it's a divine kingdom of an ancient god. Of course, if there were really another Livestead, the nature of the divine kingdom here didn't hold much importance. Divine kingdom. Leonard's pupils dilated and repeated the words. Audrey regained her sense and whispered, "Is it really Livestead?" "It's only possible." Klein had already calmed down and replied simply, "It's not floating in the air like the legends, but it's sunk into the bottom of the sea of collective subconscious, so it's hard to tell if it's real or fake." At this moment, Leonard finally managed to control himself. He looked at the magnificent city in the deep sea crater again and smiled self-deprecatingly. "I didn't expect the day when I'd come to the divine kingdom of an ancient god. Frankly, if Miss Justice wasn't here, he would have been able to help but marvel at how rich Klein's life was. Ever since he returned with his former teammate, not only did he meet the two sons of gods, king of angels, he had also entered the mysterious book world and found a city suspected to be a divine kingdom. This was many times more interesting than what he had experienced in his past year. The level of such matters was many times higher. Of course, it was a lot more dangerous. Having said that, he looked up at the floating seawater phantoms and asked thoughtfully, how do you know if the sea of collective subconscious is real or if it's imagined? It's the communication of the problem of determining Livestead's authenticity. Audrey thought for a while and said with an uncertainty, there's no way to tell the difference, or rather the sea of collective subconsciousness here is also real. In essence, collective subconsciousness is the accumulation of settling the strong emotions and feelings. Although the people in this world might be imaginary, their experiences, feelings, joy, anger, sadness, pain, happiness, and truly all happened before. As she spoke, Audrey stopped as she vaguely realized something, but she was unable to say it out loud. At this moment, Klein suddenly said, the objections that he can imagine will be conjured. The kingdom he dreams of surely descends upon the physical world. As his voice echoed, Klein put away the gold coin in his hand and jumped into the deep sea crater, his black trench coat flaring up as a result. The future that he, declared will definitely be carried out, becoming reality. As his figure guided down, the following words came out. Audrey's green eyes dazed at first before they lit up. Then she jumped towards the city of miracles. Aren't you going to divine the level of danger? This might be a divine kingdom of an ancient god. Leonard looked down at the two of them, surprised, and blurted out. In the education he received, he wasn't in line with the standard operating procedure. When did you get the wrong impression that I didn't divine it? You just didn't notice my tiny actions. I just put away the gold coin. Also, I didn't get many warnings from my intuition danger. Furthermore, if my theory is right, then the Dragon of Wisdom, Herberg, should have entered this place before. If there's any form of danger that we had, it would have long been finished off by him. If Miss Justice wasn't here, I'd really wish to berate you. As Klein silently lampooned, he adjusted his direction and speed, passing through the few thick stone columns that stood nearly hundreds of meters tall. He descended one level after another before stepping onto the grayish-white ground. He was in a spirit-body state now and could fly if he wanted to. About 2-3 seconds later, a silver-masked Miss Justice landed beside him. Audrey looked up, and after reeling from a few seconds of shock due to the grandeur of the stone columns in place, she said, "Looking from the inside and looking from the distance feels completely different. Perhaps this is how a rat truly feels in Backland." As he spoke, Leonard also glided over and looked sideways at Klein. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Klein, nor was he unaware of how cautious he was. He just needed to clarify such matters in a joint operation because there was a possibility of teammates being unknowingly corrupted, turning reckless. This was a conclusion that Nighthawks gleaned from their experience of repeated sacrifice. Currently, the indications didn't point to too much danger, Klein said truthfully. Leonard no longer looked around and said, "The City of Miracles is really big." I mean, for that, such a big city, even if we can fly, we won't be able to completely explore without spending a few days here. Or perhaps you have a destination in mind. The second half of the sentence was said while looking at Klein. Klein nodded and pointed to a huge palace that was more than 200 meters tall. There, if I remember correctly, that is the Dragon of Imagination Anklewald's residence. This is what he saw in the dream divination. Seeing that Klein already had a plan, as if he received Mr. Fool's guidance, Leonard felt relieved. He looked at the grayish-white foundation on his feet and said, "Is this a divine kingdom?" "I don't feel anything." At this moment, Audrey, who was observing the surroundings, carefully said with uncertainty, "All the abnormalities here seem to be gathered towards that place." She was referring to the place that Klein had pointed out to be the ancient god's residence. I just looked at the title for this chapter. So I feel like this is going to be maybe like a really important chapter of me just kind of like learning something. Like I feel like, okay, let me find chill music. Give me 1 minute. Let me try this one. Let me see if this one will work for the next chapter. Oh. Is this like an important chapter? Is David gonna be sad that he missed this? Okay, I have them next to me. Should I wear the Amon monocle while I read this? In front of the grayish white palace, more than 2,000 meters tall, there was a few thick stone columns that were no. Wear the hat too. Wear the hat and the monocle just for it. Klein could imagine that when the City of Miracles live stood was still floating in mid-air, these stone columns would definitely have powerful dragons crouching on them. These were the servants of ancient gods. Okay, I didn't wear it. He then looked up at the open door and said to Leonard and Audrey, "Stay close to me. Once an accident happens, I'll immediately take out the book world and return directly above the gray fog." This was the main reason why Klein didn't dare to explore this area. Okay, Audrey and Leonard didn't try putting on a brave front as they walked to Klein's side and walked alongside him. Relying on their spirit body's flight ability, the trio passed the stairs and entered the palace through the exaggerated and magnificent door. The first thing they saw was a wide space that was enough for multiple dragons to roll around freely, as well as an ancient stone pillar that seemed to prop up the sky. One to two sides of the hall, there were colorful and beautiful murals that kept extending forward and intertwining themselves with huge pillars that was multiple arm spans wide. The giant pillar was in the deepest recess of the hall right ahead of them. Without relying on anything else, just the pillar alone was enough to make people feel a strong sense of fear and make them experience the viscous of time. It was like a fossilized deity. Almost in sanity, a grayish-white figure appeared on the pillar. The figure was covered in scales, and every scale resembled a sturdy stone slab. Just the faint outline of the figure made it seem epic. Dragon of Imagination, Anklewell. Just as this thought flashed through Klein's mind, he heard the oddly familiar voice echoing in the spacious hall. Dragon of Imagination, Anklewell. As Klein looked around in astonishment, he heard Leonard sigh emotionally. The deep air listed around him as he rode, and all the low wind hardly breathed in fear. This fellow still has the mood to recite poetry. I wonder whose poem he's reciting. Klein turned to look at Leonard. Then he heard an echo. This fellow still has the mood to recite poetry. I wonder whose poem he's reciting. At this moment, Leonard's expression was one of shock. He shut his mouth tightly and shook his head in denial. But the next second, his voice sounded beside him. I didn't recite anything. What's going on? Strange. At the same moment Klein had this thought, he realized that the strange, familiar voice belonged to him. As it echoed again, repeating the thoughts that flashed through Klein's mind, then Audrey's gentle and mumble voice sounded. This hall is able to let out your thoughts, present themselves in our surroundings, and is even able to conjure them. When I saw the huge pillar just now, I was imagining what the Dragon of Imagination Anklewell looked like. It was based on the blueprint of the mind dragon I saw before. Wise whatever I'm saying? No, indeed, the hall articulates it. So, that's the case. Luckily, I didn't think of anything strange just now. Yes, reign in my thoughts. Klein began to use cognition to focus his mind. Yeah, Klein has to lock the fuck in this chapter. Bro, if he slips up even an inch, he has to brain dead. He needs to be brain dead for the next 9 pages. So that's the case. Luckily, I didn't think of anything strange just now. Yes, reign in my thoughts. Klein began to use cognition to focus his mind and not let his imagination run wild. No, he's done. His leash is so small, he's being grabbed by the top of his hair. At the same time, the corresponding words echoed around him almost in sync. Reign in my thoughts. Oh my god. So that's what Mr. World's inner world is like. He's like a child who just started school, constantly emphasizing matters that he needs to take action of. Also, the image for his cognition is actually layers of spherical light. It's so beautiful. Oh my god. No, I'm not thinking of this. I'm not describing you like this. Mr. World, I'm serious. Thoughts keep appearing as she finally couldn't help but curl her lips. As for Leonard, the voices around him were already echoing with ha 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 ha. These two fellows know. Why am I using fellow? Be polite. Be more polite. Is Klein? No. Oh my god, this is so good. As Klein listened to his thoughts, he sighed helplessly. This place is very suitable for playing truth or dare. Perhaps it should be called the Hall of Truth. What game is that? Audrey didn't need to... Oh my god. No. What game is that? Audrey didn't need to open her mouth to express her doubt. It was probably invented by Emperor Roselle. I have to be careful not to think about things I shouldn't think about. Seriously, it's too difficult to rein in random thoughts without using cognition. As Klein replied, No, Klein! He habitually warned himself only to have the hall ruthlessly betray him again. This time, Audrey laughed and said, Mr. World actually has such a side to him. I actually failed to read it in the past. To think you're experiencing such a decline. No, what did I say? Oh my god. Leonard suddenly raised his right hand and covered his mouth. Unsurprisingly, he heard Miss Justin question Klein, and a certain... Oh my god. and ascertain someone's complaint. Perhaps only turning them into marionettes can stop these fellows from having wild thoughts. Wait, what was I thinking? Shit! Calm down, calm down. Oh my god, no, this is such a good chapter. Klein took a deep breath and began to focus his attention on the matters itself. Stop. No, because all those times that Klein is lampooned, it's catching up to him. All the lampooning is catching up to him. He's lampooned his last lampooning. Let's take a look at what the mural described. Klein took a deep breath and began to focus his attention on the matters. Yes, focus your attention off of what's happening and let's take a look at what the mural describes. In ancient times, murals are very important methods for recording memories. They often contain plenty of information. At the same time, he made a suggestion. He heard Audrey's inner thoughts laugh and think, no! Klein, is this Mr. World's real name? No, don't think too much about it. Mr. World will be angry. No, I think it's more likely for him to feel embarrassed. No, it's not. No, this is all Lie's fault. Mr. World, please believe me. Calm down. Focus. He's lampooned his last lampoon. Oh my god. Using the spectator pathway's ability to control her emotions and thoughts, Audrey gradually reined in her thoughts and cast her gaze on the mural on the right. Compared to them, Leonard's ability to control a mind was slightly weaker. There were still plenty of random thoughts resounding around him, turning into marionettes. Is this fellow that dangerous now? So this is what's truly on your mind. Miss Justice's reaction is very interesting. I haven't seen that fellow in such an embarrassing situation in a long time. When Klein and Audrey began seriously looking at the murals and were exchanging their thoughts through the stirrings in their hearts, only then did Leonard gradually calm his thoughts and focus his attention. The mural on the right depicted historic developments that, oh my god. No, there was a scene of a human construction. The mural on the right depicted historic developments. There was a scene of human constructions, scenes of snow covered in plains, war and migration, various nations and cities, as well as towers and fruits that represented zero communication barriers. It was obvious that these murals started from the entrance and ended at the Dragon of Imagination's throne. Towards the end, Klein suddenly noticed a familiar figure. It was a gigantic dragon with blue eyes and ice crystal scales. It was the king of the north, Ulysses. The book's world development is based on these murals. As Klein's thoughts were exposed, he quickly looked back and found many blurry faced adventurers hunting the frost dragon before opening the door to leave. The snow and ice melted before flourishing cities like Pesotite appeared. They then discovered the weather turning cold, implying the end in which the new story was about to unfold. What do you mean by that? The context of the mural will become reality in this book world. Audrey couldn't help but have such a thought. This mural looks very ordinary. It's not even as good as the works of the street artists. As expected of the Dragon of Imagination residents is the power of the authority in the ancient gods. Leonard similarly had poignant thoughts. It's possible. Before Klein could give a more tactful reply, he heard his own voice. Let's look at the murals on the other side before putting together for analysis. Leonard and Audrey didn't object to follow him in other sides. During this process, they realized that even their spirit bodies couldn't fly in this place. As the murals were huge, it didn't take much walking before three of them could see the corresponding content of the first mural. Near the entrance made Klein's pupils similarly dilate. In the mural, giant with blurry looks, grayish blue skin, and a single vertical was holding a hard-covered book in his hand. Klein heard his own shocked and hesitated voice. In the subsequent murals, the common highlight was the goatskin binding. There was a dark brown covered book. It was obtained by the elves. The words on the surface changed and it began to put into a collection. It was obtained by different people and it kept exchanging hands until the view above the clouds came to the cosmos, where it landed a gigantic claw. In the next mural, the book seemed to have nothing to do with the scenes in front. It suddenly appeared over the surface of the sea and stayed inside the blurry ship. In the penultimate mural. It was taken away by the man wearing a top hat before it left for that ship. The next mural was located behind the gigantic pillar suspected to be the Dragon of Imagination ankle its throne. It depicted that the book from before met a classic quill. At this point, all the murals came to an end. 0-08, Leonard's shocked voice echoed in the hall. The Dragon of Imagination wants to create a set with the book and quill. What will happen? When dealing with insane will, the scene almost appeared, but ultimately it didn't happen because the book landed in my hands before I sacrificed it to Mr. Fool. Otherwise, Adam was already prepared against it and deliberately provided some help. Oh right, previously, while inside Grozel's travels, the moment that Aztec mentioned the Angel of Imagination Adam, the Frost Dragon attacked the camp. It was because the book itself didn't allow him to finish his sentence, or had Adam heard his thoughts, which became connected for him to see the cast over gaze. And cast his gaze over, stirring up a certain reaction. Klein's thoughts wandered before sounding it out loud. During this process, he could only control himself to treat the fool as another existence. At the same time he spoke, Audrey's thoughts appeared. The contents on this mirror will become reality in the physical world. Okay, we'll do one more chapter. One more chapter. And then this will be the last chapter. The call is coming from inside the house. David is in the cosmos. The contents on this mural will become reality in the physical world. Be it Klein or Leonard, they couldn't help but repeat Miss Justice's words in their hearts. If the mural on the other side determined the history of the book world, then it was only considered rather amazing. However, the discovery on the side would be enough to shake everyone's hearts and bring about a huge upheaval through their bodies. Cosmo. No. The picture you depicted would definitely show up on stage in the real world, not an illusory world. This was a performance of the deity. It's not exaggerated, right? After Leonard repeated this statement, he whispered in a low voice, finding it hard to accept. Klein, on the other hand, started his analysis out of habit. Even if 0-08 can only affect a big city, making it difficult for it to accept its range, a sequence one author of the spectator pathway should be similar, and the visionary's uniqueness has been confirmed to be in Adam's hands. Then what does the city of miracles rely on to guarantee that the contents of this mirror will become reality? The divine power of a dragon of imagination from back then. When the book was formed, the content of the murals had already been branded into the sea of collective subconsciousness, sinking right inside the spreading of the infection of every direction, so as to drive generations after generations to accomplish this without realizing it. If this is true, then the possibility of making another mural become a reality would definitely be nil. As the Dragon of Imagination has already perished, there's no way to provide any more divine power. But we can give it a try. If the contents of the new mural reality happens in the physical world, it means that the City of Miracles really is live set, and it contains a huge secret. It also implies that matters regarding the spectator pathway go deeper than what I had imagined. Author, there's a potion named... Fuck, I keep forgetting that they can hear each other's thoughts. Author, there's a potion named like that. Hearing Klein's thoughts, Leonard couldn't help but mutter. Compared to how the name Dragon of Imagination could be stretched to make an inference to the name Visionary, the potion name of Author was more eye-catching. It made one's imagination run wild. It felt like walking from reality and into the realm of fantasy. Audrey, who had long known the name of the high sequence potion, the spectator pathway, suddenly had another thought. Uniqueness. Mr. World actually managed to link up and analyze so many things from an instant. Impressive. Did I praise him too directly? Mr. World has heard it all. This hall is really hard to adapt to. No, Mr. World, I really am praising you. I really mean it. Audrey felt a little ashamed at first. But then she quickly adjusted her state of mind, trying best to keep calm. As expected of psychiatrists, she adjusted herself really quickly. A thought came to Klein's mind. No, stop thinking. Stop using your brain for 5 minutes. As expected, Mr. World isn't as cold as he looks. He's the type of person who will inwardly mutter to himself, I didn't say anything. Just as Audrey instinctively thought of something, she immediately denied it. The same voice echoed around Leonard. Klein's... No, stop saying his name! Bro, these people need to get the fuck out of this hall. They either need to stop. Oh my god. Klein's Gammon Sparrow disguise isn't bad. Almost everyone who knows him believes that he's cold and crazy. Who wouldn't have thought? Oh my god. Dude, the only person that should be allowed in this hall is me. Because you know what? I'm going in there, and you ain't hearing a fucking peep. There's nothing going on in here. You could show me the murals, and I'm like, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm the perfect person, because I'll go in. I'll see everything. And then I'll come out and I'll tell you what I saw. But you won't know anything. Because there's... It's fucking hollow, bro. Who would have thought? Just as Leonard's thoughts were about to wander, a voice interrupted him. Shut up. Oh my god, no. 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 Looking at the way Gammon Sparrow was dressed, he spread out his hands and held back his laughter as he said, "Look, this isn't cold enough, right? Cold? Then I'll directly press the unshattered crucifix against your head if you don't want your Bionic characteristic donate to the people who need it, without being able to use cognition to control his thoughts." Klein oh my god. Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Bro. Klein's kind of losing it right now. Forget about me, I don't matter. Klein is losing it, and this is so fucking entertaining. Without being able to use cognition to control his thoughts, Klein instinctively retorted. Audrey looked at Mr. World and then at Mr. Straw, and her heart skipped a beat. So they have so much... Oh my god, they're back together. So they have so much drama in their hearts. I could only tell that it was the case for Mr. Star, but I failed to read that under Mr. World's poker face... Oh my god. Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Jump Boss Mini. At critical moments like this, the experienced Audrey forcibly manipulated herself to begin reciting names as to stop her thoughts from wandering off. Who are they? Leonard's attention was diverted. They're hounds and horses my family rears. Yes! 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 Oh my god. This truly is the Hall of Truth. Denial is a river in Egypt. The call is coming from inside the house. I'm so excited. The hound costs 450 pounds. Klein suddenly recalled Butler Walter's suggestion of buying the batch of hunting dogs when he purchased Mygor Manor. Why is the first thing on Mr. World's mind the price? This question floated in Audrey's mind. Leonard pursed his lips even though he didn't say a word. He answered, "Isn't this normal? This fellow has always been a little picky about this, I remember." Leonard, shut the fuck up. Leonard, shut the fuck up. Shh. Before he could finish, Klein coughed lightly and said, "We'll continue exploring the other areas, and when we have time, we'll perform experiments on the murals. This hall really complicates matters very easily. The main point is that everyone's privacy is brought to the forefront if we aren't focused." Oh my god. Upon hearing the last sentence of his complaint, Audrey and Leonard couldn't help but laugh out loud, but not by their own will. Seeing Mr. World clearly didn't want the situation to develop into chaos again, Audrey raised her head, looked up at the ceiling, and focused her attention and got down to business. The mural on the right side controls the book world, and the left seems to affect reality. What if you draw the mural on the ceiling? What would happen? Klein immediately made a connection. The Dragon of Imagination's authority contains at least 3 aspects. An envisioned kingdom will descend upon the physical world to declare future that will happen in the real world and imagine objects that will be conjured. The first point corresponds to the right mural, and the second point corresponds to our guesses on the left mural. Then, could the blank spot on the palace's ceiling be related to the third authority? As long as you draw an object you imagine on the ceiling, it will be conjured and be usable. Audrey easily understood what the world meant. Then, what if we were to draw the Dragon of Imagination? Leonard suggested. Klein glanced at him. First of all, you would have... No, because Klein's pissed right now. First of all, you would have had to have seen the dragon of imagination without completely breaking down and losing control. Secondly, you need to restore your main details of his body. Finally, you have to know how to draw. Oh my god, he's so mad. I might not know how to know, but it doesn't mean that I can't in the future. I can hire a home tutor to teach me, Leonard grumbled in reply. And what does the main details refer to? His body structure or the symbol and labels depicted from the godhood? At this moment, Audrey pursed her lips and said, with a brisk tone controlling herself so as to not burst out laughing, I can draw. No, Audrey is like, here's the thing. Audrey's loving this. She's literally loving every second of this, but at the same time, she's like, the girls are fighting. The girls are fighting. And she is eating that shit up right now. This was... No, because I'm sorry. I even said last stream, I was like, I don't really see it. After this, they're literally acting like exes. This is a divorced couple right here. The girls are fighting. This was a basic skill for the noble lady, and Audrey was quite talented in this aspect. Yes, we can try in the future when there's time. Klein nodded and walked towards the giant pillar right in front of the main hall. His plan for the expedition was to first gain the complete understanding of the situation before considering how to venture deeper. At the same time, he thought of something else because of Leonard's question. The symbol and labels from godhood, these contain plenty of mixed knowledge. I can even let people learn the corresponding potion formulas of beyond their powers after surviving the impact from witnessing it directly. Then, before the first blasphemy slate appeared, what would one obtain if they survived directly looking at the demigod or even an ancient god? There was no such things as potion formulas back then. Is it only through using magic potions to advance one's mythical creature form step by step in the godhood aspects to be able to contain this portion of knowledge? Or perhaps after the portion formula appears, mythical creatures who used any method of advancement had the corresponding knowledge forged within them. If it's because of the two reasons I came up with, it means that the knowledge of godhood can change and it can increase. Do angels of the Murder Pathway have the ability to alter such knowledge or even delete them directly? Mr. World's considerations are so deep and profound. Audrey, honey, no, don't do it. Because then it's going to get Leonard started, and then that's going to get Klein started, and then they're just going to yap back and forth. Because they're both fucking heated right now. Mr. Wald's considerations are so deep and profound, they involve very high levels. Audrey couldn't help but sigh. Leonard couldn't control the voice in his heart either. There's such a thing. I should ask old man when I return. Oh, okay. I was expecting something else. This fellow sure knows a lot. It's not entirely a pretense when he's acting as Garen's Sparrow. There it is. At least the sense of profoundness seemed to belong to him. Thank you for your praise. Stop! With the small blood bottle in one hand and the unshadowed crucifix in the other, Klein forced himself to rein in his thoughts and cast his gaze at the ancient god's throne. Oh my god, I'm kicking my feet, twirling my hair right now. They were in the spirit body forms now. Although they were unable to fly due to the restrictions in the main hall, their top speed was still much faster than their human form. It was only then that Klein realized that behind the pillar that looked like the Dragon of Imagination's throne, there was a dark tunnel. I can't see anything. If only there was a light. A thought subconsciously flashed through Audrey's mind. Then, in a tunnel, a pure and soft light shone out, illuminating inside the tunnel completely. Without needing to enter, Klein, Leonard, and Audrey saw a pair of double bronze doors that deepest at the end of the tunnel. Oh my god. Okay. There were countless indescribable symbols covering the doors, like countless chains and extended behind them, as if they were sealing something. It gave off a heavy and mysterious feeling. In the city of miracles of the dragon of the residence of an ancient god, there was apparently a sealed door behind them, his throne. Almost at the same time, the three of them seemed to look through the bronze door in the darkest inside. Following that, they heard a loud thumping in their hearts. It was from their own heartbeats. Yes. No. If what happens, I need to read. After that, the bronze green color on the surface of the unshadowed crucifix. Oh, okay, sorry. 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 I'm cheating it. Oh my god. Okay, here's the thing. I'm back to Leo Klein. Leonard for life. I can't believe I ever said that I didn't see anything. They are together. They are married, actually. Divorced. Separated. Because you know when you're married to someone and then you have to like be separated before you can actually divorce them? They're in the separation stage. They aren't divorced yet, but they're getting there. Them tomorrow, not gonna lie, because I have a lot of ideas and theories after this chapters. We'll see. Other than that, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for joining. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. Have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you're at. And I will see you guys next time. Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Door, and bye-bye.